have their fingers in so many very powerful pies, and they have a deep moat around what they do. Palo Alto, people don't recognize, maybe they don't, how vulnerable systems are becoming because of AI to cyber threats. AI expands the threat surface, and it's going to make Palo Alto, we believe, continue to be one of the most important companies to defend against this. And they have this platform solution we think is going to continue to win new customers in 2026.
Is that one of your big themes for next year? I've heard a lot of people talking about not only AI, but also cybersecurity.
Yeah, it's been a theme for us for a while. We've owned Palo Alto for clients for many years. We do believe that this world is becoming more and more complex, more vulnerable to attacks. The U.S. government has pulled away a little bit from the government efforts to defend, so we think that's going to push more business into the private sector. And yeah, we just don't see this going away anytime soon. In fact, think about it as a utility. Just like you need electricity and water, you need cyber protection in this kind of world.
In terms of the consumer, we definitely saw some strength today. Joanne, does that continue? I know that you like certain names like TJX and Walmart and so on, but that could go either way, right? That could be a bet on the K-shaped economy getting even more K-shapes, or it could just be a bet on the resilience of the consumer.
Yeah, there's a few reasons to own these kind of stocks in a portfolio, Bonnie, and one of them is because they're very good companies that are well run and they're well placed in the market. TJ Maxx obviously does particularly well actually when recessions come along, because people like to save money. People even like it during really great times because nobody loves a bargain more than the average shopper. And so they've seen their foot traffic remain strong, even as their inventory becomes cheaper during downtime. So it's a good name to have in a portfolio for protection, but it's also so well run and so loved by many shoppers that we think it's going to continue to do well. Consumer more broadly is, as you point out, subject to this K-shaped situation. The high-end consumer continues to do well. We like Williams-Sonoma for that reason. And at the low end, there's still going to be a lot of struggles. Wage growth is slowing down, and that is going to prove to be a challenge even as those tariffs potentially bite more on the budgets of low-income consumers.
Joanne, I want to ask you about the Fed. I know you have consulted for the Fed and many of these, the IMF and the World Bank, big economic powerhouses, global powerhouses. What do they do in a situation where we have strong growth, we have strong demand from this sort of the upper end of the K-shaped economy, but then we have no hiring or even firing, job losses due to AI, where like rate cuts aren't going to move the needle much?
Yeah, Matt, that's a really good point, that the Fed has limited ability to help, certainly at that granular level that you just talked about. The Fed's dual mandate says target stable prices and maximum employment. And so they're going to focus more on the labor market than they do on the GDP numbers. And we know we've lost a lot of labor because of the immigration crackdown. And yet we've seen unemployment rise, that rate ticking up to 4.6%. So they're going to be watching, I think, the labor market data most carefully. And the fact that...
Hello, my name is Dr. Paul Cottrell. We are live streaming on Rumble, YouTube, and simulcasting on X Spaces. You can also see both live streams on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Please help support the work that I do by donating. You can donate on my website. You can donate through Stripe, PayPal, or Buy Me a Coffee. You can be a paid member to Patreon or my Substack. All these videos I do for free to inform you how to improve your health and wellness, give you my perspective on what's going on in the news, and also how to trade the news. Certain things that are happening domestically or internationally affects your portfolio, and I'm telling you how to manage through that. All right. This week is going to be, because of the holiday, less days of trading. So the liquidity isn't as great, the volumes aren't as great during a holiday week, but the S&P 500 is trading at 6,881. VIX is trading at 14. Euro is trading at 1.17, I should say. Japanese yen's trading at it's trading at 156.43. Bitcoin is trading at 87,000. Oil is trading at 87 $8.95, and natural gas is trading at 4.125. All right. I'm longing oil and natural gas under the thesis that when the United States hits Venezuela with major air and sea operations, that oil will pop to about $4 or $5. It's trading at almost 58. So we may see $62, $63 a barrel. I also think that natural gas will blip up by about 0.2, maybe 0.3. So if it's trading at 4.1, maybe it'll be trading at 4.4. All right. But it won't last for very long. And then once things start to stabilize, the oil prices will start to go down. So you have to be careful, but I suspect that there will be an oil spike and then come back down. So you long it and then short it. Now with the S&P 500 by year end, my target is still 6,850. We're a little bit above that right now. I don't think that there's an impetus to actually push the market further. Maybe there is a Santa Claus rally soon here. I doubt it, but we may have a year-end rally where we hit 6,900, but I think that's a low probability. The question is when does Trump hit Venezuela? Now, there's a historical context here. George Washington crossed the Delaware River to kill German soldiers that were helping the British, the Haitians, all right? He did that on Christmas Eve. I wouldn't be surprised that Trump tries to do something during Christmas Eve or Christmas Day with an attack on Venezuela. And normally, our military operations start at night. So whatever he does, he's probably going to do it at night. I wouldn't be surprised that it's on Christmas Eve. But the chances of it happening are low. Okay. With that, we also are seeing the bond market in terms of price going down. So yields are slightly moving upward. The Japanese yen is stabilized. Right now, the S&P 500 is trading at 6,885. All right, so that's what's going on in the market. Now, in terms of the news, I want to go over some AI stuff, the Navy warships that Trump was talking about yesterday. Oracle is having some problems because of the circular financing for the hyperscalers. Also, Larry Ellison, who owns Oracle and the founder of Oracle, it looks like he's going to have to fund the Paramount deal. So I want to cover that too. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and help support the work that I do. Again, all these videos are for free. I have thousands of videos out there for free. I don't put stuff behind a paywall, but please help support the work by donating and being a paid member on some of the channels like Substack and Patreon. But get the great products that I use every day, all right? These products will help to slow down the aging process. The structural nanosilver soaps will help to neutralize and help the health of your skin. You can get it in peppermint, in lavender, also in charcoal tea tree, and lemongrass. So please go to my store, get a few bars for your household. They're very high quality. Use them every day. Now, we're in the winter season, so it's really important for you to get the structural nanosilver drops that I have. All right, you can get it in cherry. You can also get it in blueberry and in honey and lemon. The moment you have that throat irritation, take them right away. This will help to neutralize and help to mitigate that throat irritation. You can use them prophylactically. If someone around you is not feeling well, take them and protect that oral pharynx. Super important. especially for this winter season. So please go to my store and get the very high quality structural nano silver drops.
Alrighty.
Let's listen into Southcom reveals new lethal strike on alleged drug boat.
Trump beefing up the Navy as tensions mount in the Caribbean. Kevin Cork is live in the nation's capital with that new information.
Good evening, Kevin. Good evening to you, my friend. The Coast Guard's pursuit of a third sanctioned oil tanker near Venezuela comes as the administration intensifies its pressure campaign on Nicolas Maduro, which, as you know, Jonathan, includes a sweeping blockade of the waters off his country's coast, targeting illicit oil shipments and so-called dark fleet vessels, with an administration official telling our Lucas Tomlinson today the U.S. Coast Guard is in active pursuit of a sanctioned dark fleet vessel that is part of Venezuela's illegal sanctions invasion. It is flying a false flag and under a judicial seizure order. Reuters many times reporting tonight that another official says that tanker is operating under sanctions, though at last check had not yet been boarded. As for the president, well, tonight he is holding on to that warning to Mr. Maduro should he attempt to attack the U.S.
He can do whatever he wants. I mean, we have a massive armada formed, the biggest we've ever had. Whatever he wants to do, if he wants to do something, if he plays tough, it'll be the last time he's ever able to play tough.
Speaking of the president, announcing today that the U.S. will build Trump-class military vessels, new age battleships, inching the country closer to the construction of what the administration is advertising as its golden fleet. Delivery for said shipments will probably take around 2.5 years, John.
Kevin, great to see you as always. Thank you, sir.
You bet.
With me now, the Foreign Desk Editor-in-Chief, Lisa Daftari, and former Vice President Cheney's Deputy National Security Advisor, now Heritage Foundation Senior Research Fellow, Steve Yates. Thank you both for being here. I just want to introduce our viewers to some new video coming in to us right now. It's from the DoD. There has been another strike, you see it right there, on an alleged drug boat in the Eastern Pacific. The military announcing today what they called a lethal kinetic strike on a low-profile vessel, which of course is military speak for we blew up a small boat. Lisa, this is an ongoing campaign. It's an effective campaign, according to the president, who says drugs coming in down something like 96.2%. Is it a worthwhile campaign?
You know, it's interesting because you see this campaign, as you put it, framed differently depending on what news outlet you're watching. But to break it down, what's happening here is episodic. That's what the Trump administration intends. They want to establish deterrence in the hemisphere. They're looking at the Venezuelan regime, Maduro, who is consolidating power. He's involved with terrorism. He's involved in shipping narcotics into our country and flooding all these drugs into our country and into our suburbs. And of course, getting away with it. So if we're going to do it, we can't be half pregnant about our foreign policy. This is a campaign that they have already unleashed. And the choice is ours. Are we going to maintain this maritime pressure on Venezuela right now, or kick the can down the road and deal with it with troops on the ground and deal with a major escalation of sorts further into the future?
And Steve, I think that's the big question here. What is the end game? We're seeing this targeting of alleged drug boats. We're seeing the seizure of oil tankers. Where do you think the president really wants this to go? Is regime change the ultimate goal here?
Well, the president has methodically increased pressure. He kind of does it layer upon layer. And if it leads to the pressure that convinces Maduro to leave or others push within Venezuela to do it, I doubt very much that there's an Iraq-style campaign in the works. But if all that's accomplished in this is to establish the simple idea that there are legal and illegal ways to operate in the waterways in our hemisphere, that's a major down payment to a change for the better in our quality of life. These the narco-terrorist vessels are one set of those fleets, but the Chinese are operating in illegal fisheries off the coasts of a lot of these countries too. And so this is a significant deterrent message, not just to the Venezuelan fleet that's operating illegally, but to many others too.
Yeah, Lisa, do you think that it's an important point we were talking about just before we went on air, the deterrence message? Right. Does it work?
Absolutely, it works if it's done properly. Absolutely, it works if it's done properly, just like sanctions.
So what is properly?
Properly means it's enforced. Properly means if this is the episodic campaign that we have launched, that we maintain it, that we maintain sanctions, and we continue the pressure. You know, there's many ways to apply pressure and use many diplomatic tools. And the Trump administration pivots nicely to say, this is what we're dealing with. You will not put drugs in our country. We are not going to tolerate any sort of terrorism. We're not going to allow Maduro to completely consolidate power and to continue going on. So I think at this point, we continue to show them that we will escalate to the point where we feel comfortable and that the Trump administration will call the shots. So at this point, look, they'll call it a blockade. They'll use all kinds of language to say that this is not legal. But what's really happening is that we are enforcing sanctions that have already legally been placed and sending a very clear message to Maduro and his regime.
Steve, there's some hand-wringing among Democrats and maybe some Republicans as well about the legality or illegality of what is happening right now. Does that matter in the bigger picture? The president has said we don't need a declaration of war, for instance. We can just kill these people because they are threatening Americans. So where do you stand on the legality-illegality issue, Steve?
Well, constitutionally, the president is very, very well within his rights to give these kinds of orders. I support the idea of identifying these narco-terrorists as exactly that, terrorists. And I think for the hundreds of thousands of American families that have lost loved ones due to this deadly trade, I think this is a welcome move. It was important to secure the land border. It's just as important to secure the sea routes as well. And I think that this is a proper move. Anyone who's sort of saying otherwise, it's kind of hard for them to justify illegal movement of goods and people on the high seas under false flags any more than they were justifying illegal migration.
Lisa, is there any point at which we see U.S. troops on the ground in Venezuela, do you think?
That's not the long-term goal here. This is a much broader campaign. And I think, we're not pushing for regime change, for example, but if it should lead to that, right now we are very squarely focused on U.S. interests, and that is to establish deterrence, to bring safety and security to our southern border, to establish that deterrence, and to give the Maduro and Colombia, any other regime, the message, including China, Russia, Iran. They are all operating in the hemisphere, and I mean, it's sending a very clear message.
Steve, really briefly, I'll give you the last word. Boots on the ground at any point in Venezuela or no?
I doubt it very much, but the president has proven willing to use force decisively, more to strike hard and reset, not to invade, occupy, and rebuild.
Yep. Steve Yates, Lisa DeFtari, great to have you both here with us this evening. Thank you so much.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to...
All right, we're going to go to CNN now, and them complaining about Trump naming the destroyer class called Trump class destroyers. I'll tell you, Trump loves to troll these liberals. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Max 35. This is 35 parts per million, and Cleanse, which is 30 parts per million. They're at different price points, but you take them the same way. What they will do is help to boost up the immune system. You take a teaspoon a day, swish it in your mouth, gargle about 20 seconds, and then swallow it. What this will do is improve your oral cavity, your oral pharynx, help with your mucosal barrier, and help the health of your epithelial cells. This is super important to do every day. I've been doing this for more than 5 years, every day. Now, by doing this, you're boosting up your immune system, and when you're boosting up your immune system, you don't get sick as often. So you're slowing down the aging process. It's really important to do, especially during the winter season. And if someone around you is not feeling well or you're not feeling well, take a tablespoon or 2 a day. Do the same thing, swish it in your mouth, gargle, swallow. And by doing that, you're neutralizing. And you're protecting those epithelial cells in your oropharynx. So please, pay attention. This works. Go to my store, get the Max 35 or the Cleanse. Also, what's really important to take during the winter season is the vitamin D3. Vitamin D3 is dual purpose. It helps with gene expression. It's a gene expression cofactor, so your cells will perform properly. Vitamin D3 helps to absorb calcium. If you do resistance training, it will allow you to build denser bone. Vitamin D3 also helps with cardiovascular health. And vitamin D3 helps to get cells to go into apoptosis if they're infected. So please, take vitamin D3 every day, do some resistance training as part of your anti-aging protocol, but take vitamin D3, especially during the winter season. Use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last.
Construction of a new class of Navy ships named after himself. The president said that this quote-unquote Trump class of warships would be kind of the centerpiece of what he described as a golden fleet for the U.S. Navy. Joining us right now is retired Army Brigadier General Steve Anderson and retired U.S. Army Major Mike Lyons. Gentlemen, thanks for being here. Major Lyons, on the new Navy fleet, let's start there, that Trump just has now ordered. You say that it raises some new questions as he's announcing this. What and why?
Okay, the question is whether or not the battleship has a role in the modern Navy and whether or not it will project power into China. That's really what this is all about. Battleships were decommissioned back in the early 90s for a reason, as the carrier became the center of gravity for naval operations and protecting that carrier and the aviation assets on it. This introduces a new command center and command control that likely can go closer to shore and perhaps project power there. But it's one big target that the Chinese have an advantage with more ships right now within their naval fleet.
Let me get this straight. A destroyer is smaller than a carrier. And he's complaining that the destroyer is too big. It might be a large target. Don't you think a carrier would be too? See, the problem that has happened in the Navy, to my understanding, is that they were focused on carrier groups and air superiority and having smaller, more nimble frigates that can launch Tomahawk missiles. All right? The problem is that the frigates, once they get hit, they sink. All right? They're not that sturdy, but there's a lot of them. They're smaller. So they wanted to have more frigates, get away from the destroyers, and have these strike groups, these battle carrier strike groups. The thing is that the naval battle that will take place between the United States and China is not going to be the typical naval battle. There's going to be a lot of drones. There's going to be underwater drones. There's going to be a surface, water surface drones. There's going to be air drones that act as kamikazes. So like Back to the Future, the term Back to the Future, for the ones that know what I'm talking about. If you look at the strategy of the Japanese during World War II, they had kamikazes, right? Because they didn't have smart bombs, right, at that time. So they had to have a pilot target a ship with a plane that had high explosives. Then eventually, over time, the United States builds technology coming out of the Star Wars program and the investments from Reagan, and we end up having smart bombs, all right, using GPS, telemetry, and all this stuff. But it's very costly. And what if our GPS satellites are knocked out? The war isn't going to start. The real conflict isn't going to start in water or on land. It's going to start in space, because we or the Chinese are going to try to knock out each other's GPS systems to disable the capability of the smart bombs. So if that happens, then the frigates aren't going to be as successful. Now, if you have a steel construction destroyer with guns, even if your Tomahawk missiles don't work because of GPS, you can shoot. Not so much on a frigate. So we need a little bit of more technology that's dealing with drones and that are autonomous and that don't need GPS, satellite GPS. And we need a little bit of the old style, where there's more firepower from the sea onto the land, or sea to sea. So maybe Trump's onto something here. Because what is happening with China is that as they are getting longer range missiles, as they're expanding their presence in the Navy, in their Navy, and turning into a blue water Navy, they are projecting out their bubble of defense. All right? And we have our bubbles of defense: land to air missiles, surface to air missiles, defense. We have planes that have long range missiles, right? And based on the range of those different capabilities and defense systems, depends on the actual diameter of the bubble. And they overlap. China's bubbles overlap with their own, and they overlap on our defense systems. So no one really has a real advantage in terms of distance, being able to shoot from distance. So it's going to have to be very fast, and you have to knock them out right away. And the added complication is what happens if your GPS systems are knocked out in space. So you may need to have something that is a little bit more old school. Plus, there's an added benefit. When you're building these destroyers, you're creating jobs.
Again, trying to build something like this in an environment, right, where we've not been successful in getting out destroyers and other things that are more important right now to our Navy. So the question is, again, whether it is has a role in the modern Navy. And
I think there's a big split within the strategic world of the Navy to have or not to have destroyers. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that destroyers are bad. But they probably brought on someone. I should be fair because I haven't seen this video, but the thing is it looks like they brought on someone that just hates Trump's strategy. All right? What happens if an aircraft carrier is sunk? What do you do then? You think the frigates are going to, save the day? The answer is no.
Project the kind of power that the president thinks it's going to do.
It's really interesting. And General Anderson being the president.
On the 12th.
All right. U.S. December consumer confidence is at 89.1. Estimate was 91. So confidence in December has gone down. This is breaking news from Bloomberg.
Christmas lights were looking to me. 12 engines lightning, 11 gavers sailing, 10 stars are cutting, 9 lights are shining.
It's really interesting. And General Anderson being the president said The way he described it is that the United States desperately is in need of ships, and he called the existing Navy fleet, the way he called it is old and tired and obsolete. What do you see in this announcement?
It is.
Well, I totally agree with Major Lyons. I mean, I think that the battleship is not the right approach. I mean, a small, agile fleet is something that the Navy needs and could use. But modern warfare has changed.
He's promoting the frigates, but they don't have the firepower. And if they're hit, they're disabled because they're made out of aluminum.
Lyons insinuated. I mean, now drone technology is paramount. So
I agree.
I mean, you know, having a battleship, a big, large floating target. I mean, I look back 3 years ago when the Ukrainians blew up the Russian battleship Moskva using low technology anti-ship missiles and essentially surfboards on remote control loaded with munitions. I mean, that, as Major Lyons points out, a battleship is a large floating target. So we need to focus the American industrial base on building drones. Secretary of Defense has stood up this drone dominance program, which I think is a great step forward. And then we need to focus the American industrial shipbuilding on small, agile ships, not battleships.
President Trump announced that the Navy will build new battleships to create a so-called Golden Fleet. The new vessels are being called Trump-class battleships. They are expected to be longer and larger than the Navy's World War II era versions.
So the battleships are going to be armed just in terms of guns and missiles at the highest level. They'll also have hypersonic weapons, many hypersonic weapons, state-of-the-art electric rail guns, and even the high-powered lasers that you've been starting to read about. You have lasers where you aim the laser at a target and it just wipes it out. The U.S. Navy will lead the design of
like
these
a whole
ships
city.
along with me because I'm a very aesthetic person.
President says the U.S. will start with 2 ships with the goal of building up to 25. It comes, of course, as Trump has deployed dozens of U.S. military assets, including Navy warships, in the Caribbean amid an escalating feud with Venezuela's leader. We're bringing my Republican source tonight, Congressman Carlos Jimenez of Florida. He serves on both the House Armed Services and Homeland Security committees. Congressman, very grateful to have you on the show tonight. The president previously told military members at Quantico this year, this, quote, "I don't like some of the ships you're doing aesthetically. They say, oh, it's stealth. I say it's not stealth. An ugly ship is not necessary in order to say you're stealth." Now, one of the renderings for the new ship shows Trump's image on the ship itself. What do you make of Trump's interest in being involved in the design for these ships?
Look, the only thing I care about is that we develop the most lethal surface combatant in the world because we need it. Right now, China can outproduce us like 250 to 1, and they already have the largest navy in the world. They're the #1 adversary. We've got to get to it.
Right, and this wasn't and us being behind the 8 ball wasn't because of Trump. It was because of lack of preparation during the Biden administration, during the Obama administration, during the Bush administration, Jr., because he was so damn focused on the Middle East that our Navy started to wither away. Now, think about it. Your aircraft carrier is protected by what? Oh, air. You have some missile defense system, right? Some gunnery, but it's primarily protected by fighter jets. And let's think about this. In frigates, they're much smaller. But if you have your battle group that has a battleship, a strike group with a battleship, helping to protect your aircraft carrier, and it's also showing presence in the port because it's large. All right, these frigates are really small. I mean, in relative terms. So having a few of the the destroyers. I think it's a good idea. But you definitely 100%, I totally agree. You have to have a lot of drones, cheap drones that can coordinate and hit targets and act as like kamikazes. For sure, 100% of that. And also underwater submarine, autonomous, very small drones.
And build a new classes of ships that are going to be up to the task of the new threats that are emerging every single day. And so again, I don't care what they're called. I only want I want them to be lethal, and I want us to build them as fast as we can because we're falling way behind.
Do we have the capability to, again, whatever you call them, to build these ships? Because our capacity to build ships has been declining in recent decades.
Yeah, right. It was declining. You know why? Because of regulations, because of a poor military planning. We wasted our money, trillions of dollars, treasure and blood in the Middle East, and not focused on the Asian Pacific. And we had a bunch of stupid Wall Street analysts, hedge fund guys, moving money to China, building up their industry, and gutting the United States. What for? That 10, 20% return annually. Do that for a few years and you can retire in Miami. But now we're at a point where we're going to be going to war with China. And we are behind the 8 ball. Thank you, hedge fund manager, for screwing things up once again. Thank you, private equity manager, for screwing things up again. There's a special place for private equity in hell. It's like one level even below Dante's Inferno. Like Dante had 9 levels of hell. Well, there's a special level of hell for private equity. It's level 10.
And that's one of the things that we're doing in the House Armed Services Committee is emphasizing that we need to step up our shipbuilding capability.
Yeah, well, the House Armed Services Committee has been around for a long time. This is something not new. Why did they let this happen? Why? Why did they let this happen? Oh, they had a lobbying group that basically said, let's invest in frigates. Let's invest in aluminum hulls. Let's invest in very expensive GPS smart bombs that every time you launch one, it costs $5 million. Money. It wasn't about defense. It was about money. We're at the point where we're behind the 8 ball because of people like him not doing their job in Congress.
In the United States, because we have fallen way behind.
And it's his fucking fault. And his colleagues.
These capabilities to go offshore, especially to China. So look, when I tell you that they can outbuild us 250 to 1, for every large ship that we build in the United States, China can build 250. We're not going to catch up to them, but what we need to do is.
Now, for the ones that are watching live and in the later premieres, do you think Epstein is that important? Or do you think that our build out of our Navy, reconstituting our Navy, is way more important than Epstein? Now, if you have a friend that's always talking about Epstein, or you have the social media network of individuals always talking about Epstein, you should just interject and say, Epstein doesn't matter. Losing the Pacific in a war with China does matter. Because your life will radically change. Radically change. The Epstein files doesn't change your life, nor will it ever change your life. Us having military prowess with our Navy, yeah. You have the lifestyle in the United States because of the hegemonic power that we earned, and maintained post-World War II.
Be sure that the ships we build are highly lethal and able to combat the growing Chinese threat. And so we need to get to it. We need to start building them. And if it's a new class of battleship, then so be it, with new weapons, space-age weapons. There won't be the big guns. There'll be something else. And we need to start building, and we need to start building that capability right here in the United States.
Well, President Trump announcing a new battleship design he's calling the Trump class. Watch.
The U.S. Navy will lead the design of these ships along with me, because I'm a very aesthetic person, alongside our partners in American industry. And we're going to have Pete Hegseth and Marco and a lot of very talented people involved. A lot of it's already been done. We've been doing this for months.
Let's discuss that and more with Republican Congressman John Rose of Tennessee. He's also a candidate for governor. Congressman, just to start the news, your reaction to President Trump announcing the creation of this new class of battleships, is this something that you believe should be happening? Do you believe there are any ties to what we've been seeing in the Western Hemisphere, particularly in Venezuela, with this announcement?
Well, I don't know if there are direct ties. Certainly the president ran on the promise to make sure that our military was up to the task of defending the country. We know that our Navy is an important element of that, and I think the president's announcement is just in keeping with the longer-term plans to keep our Navy in a position to be able to defend this nation and to serve our interests around the world.
It's certainly been a policy focus of some of his top advisors, again, not just this term, but also in his first term as well. The naming of the ship class after himself, my White House colleague Kristen Holmes said, probably shouldn't be surprised. They renamed the U.S. Institute of Peace the Donald J. Trump Institute of Peace, renamed the Kennedy Center the Trump Kennedy Center. What does it tell you that the president keeps naming things after himself?
Well, I think this president has been through a lot, was pursued relentlessly by the previous administration. And so I think you see to some extent a recoil and a recalibration from that. And obviously this president is proud of the historic electoral victory that he achieved. And so I think you see some manifestation of that in these events that you described.
The roar of the engine, the G-forces pushing human endurance to its limit.
Alrighty. Let's listen into Bloomberg here. Looks like they're talking about GDP.
The 30-day average, which makes sense. Why would you be in here if you didn't have to?
Did we get the Santa Claus rally already, do you think?
GDP grew 4.3% in third quarter, faster in 2 years.
You think about 2026, and we just had a couple minutes, we were chatting with Brian Belsky earlier. He's continuing to be bullish, and he's basically just saying, I've got rates coming down, I've got double-digit earnings, I've got some stimulus coming in, and there's a lot of tailwinds there. And he's even suggesting that you don't have to rely as much maybe on the AI theme in 26 as you have.
Because everything's going to widen out?
Yeah, a little bit there, but I'd be loath to get out of those AI trades at the moment if I'm a professional investor. All right, we're going to have more coming up. This is Bloomberg. Good morning.
All right, I want to play National Review. He's looking like he's, there's a critique on Tucker Carlson. But before we do that, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Help support the work that I do. These are videos that are for free, and I'm telling you how to play the market. All right, right now you have the S&P 500 at 6,879. I still have a year-end target of 6,850. We may be lucky and hit 6,900 for the S&P 500, so pay attention to that. Also pay attention to natural gas. That's trading at 4.06, and oil is trading at 57.9. I suspect that oil and natural gas will spike a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit, once we hit Venezuela with our Navy and Air Force. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the magnesium and zinc. This will boost up your immune system and help with brain function. Magnesium is super important for brain function. Vitamin C and magnesium will help with your skin, your immune system, and your brain function. Take them together. This is super important, especially during the winter season. And like I've been saying, many people that are age 40 or older, about 30% of you within 5 years will get early onset of dementia. Now there's different levels of dementia. Some of it is manageable, some of it's really bad. And there's 3 categories. Most of the dementia that will arise will be through ischemic means, microclotting, microbleeding, that leads to neuron death. About 24 to 24.9% of the other cohort group will end up getting amyloidosis, which is a buildup of unfolded or misfolded proteins that can't be broken up. All right, there's a buildup of plaque, very similar to Alzheimer's. There's different types of amyloidosis. All right, and then prion disease, about 0.1% will have a prion problem. The bulk of the cases will be the ischemic, which is about 75%. Now, the ones that are 40 years of age or older, in the next 5 years, about 30% of you will have some type of cognitive decline, early onset of dementia. You better start paying attention to me. I was right about the cancers. I was right about the autoimmune disorder. I was right about the autoimmune dysfunction where your immune system is going down, what I called AIDS-like syndrome. I was right about the cardiovascular problem, and I'm right about the dementia. You better start paying attention to me because there's no one more accurate on the crisis of 2020. You can mitigate the problem. You can mitigate it by making sure that you stay active and you provide the micronutrients for your neurons, reduce inflammation, soak up free radicals, and even do like kinematics because you want to activate those neurons. Now, a lot of people don't realize that when you do resistance training, you're activating your muscle. You're sending a signal through your nerves to contract a muscle. But not only are you lifting, when you're lifting weights, you're helping with the balancing. There's a coordination of different muscles. And a certain area of your brain is going to be moving that type of musculature. And the balancing is going to be helped by your cerebellum. All right. So it's really important to do kinematics, do some resistance training that activates a certain type of neuron. But it's also important to have stretching and balancing because you're activating, when you're stretching, you're activating your neurons that are attached to the ends of your muscle. And when you're balancing, you're helping with your cerebellum. And part of an early onset of dementia is not just memory decline. It's gait issues. It's the speed of your walking. It's the coordination of your body. It's the speed of you getting out of a chair. You're going to have to look in the mirror and say, we're in the aftershock. It's up to you to mitigate some of the problems. Now, there is no silver bullet. Sorry, there's not. But what you can do is mitigate.
Accountants who lead don't waste time. They invest in the CMA. CMA, Confidence Certified.
Pay attention, everyone. We have a new conspiracy theory, or at least an old conspiracy theory that's getting new attention.
With the attack on the USS Liberty that everyone's so afraid to talk about, clearly targeted on purpose by a country we're supporting, Israel, and it's somehow shameful to say that? Why? Why is it shameful to say that? Who knows why it's shameful to say?
Just remember, Tucker Carlson's father worked for the CIA. He was part of a radio broadcasting group. Tucker Carlson says that he was declined by the CIA. Tucker Carlson didn't finish college. Tucker Carlson came from a very wealthy family, the Swansons, and was raised as a brat. He was a brat. Tucker Carlson, the conservative, is a brat.
But it shouldn't be.
Hey everyone, Rich Lowry of National Review here, and that was Tucker Carlson, of course, talking about the attack on the USS Liberty. The idea is that during the 6 Days War, Israel went out of its way, unprovoked, deliberately to attack a U.S. naval vessel, killing dozens of U.S. sailors on board because Israel is such a treacherous, alleged friend and partner of the United States. This has long been a chestnut of anti-Semitic theorizing. With the rise of the woke right, this theory has gotten more currency. We heard it talked about at the recent TPUSA conference. Here's Jack Posobiec.
As Navy veterans, as anyone who serves in the Navy, you learn about, you study, and you realize that we live in a serious world. And it's something that a lot of people in the Navy feel that we never really got full accountability for. Still have a lot of questions about the Navy investigation that was done and the official statements that came out. A lot of people said, just doesn't feel like it's good enough when you have a ship flying the U.S. flag that's being attacked by
remember the Gulf of Tonkin? Same problem.
That you are nominally supposed to believe is an ally.
Now, the conspiracy theory here is demented. However, the event actually happened, obviously. 34 U.S. sailors killed, 171 wounded. Just awful. Just an awful scene on the USS Liberty, which is a spy ship. Now, this is during the 6 Days War between Israel, of course, and an Arab coalition, including Egypt and Jordan. Very sensitive. The Sixth Fleet is monitoring the situation. This is during the Cold War, 1967. You don't want a flashpoint with the Soviet Union. During the Cold War, the Sixth Fleet is keeping its distance from the action, but the Liberty, a spy ship, gets quite close to it. At one point, just 13 nautical miles from the Sinai coast, where it can see the actual damage from the fight here between Israel and Egypt. At one point, it requests a destroyer escort, a U.S. destroyer escort, but it is denied from higher ups.
No, isn't that interesting? Spy ship. USS Liberty requests a destroyer. Now, what were we just listening about? How important it is to have part of our naval fleet with destroyers. When the destroyers aren't there, you have ships like the USS Liberty banged up, shot up. But if you had a destroyer around, not so much.
In order to remove itself by as far as 100 miles from the combat zone, but the communication system in the U.S. Navy at that time is so complicated, it doesn't get the message until after this terrible event has happened. So what sets this event in train? Well, there are a lot of elements. I'm going to simplify a little bit here, but there's an explosion in an ammunition dump on the Sinai coast. The Israelis assume Egyptian ships have shelled this location. So they go looking for Egyptian ships, and they see what is the Liberty. They don't know that. They see the Liberty heading towards Egypt, and they think, aha, that must be an Egyptian ship that is fleeing after carrying out this attack. They do recon, they don't see identifying markers, so the assumption that this is an Egyptian vessel holds. As Pasovic noted, there was a flag on this U.S. vessel, but in later inquiry from the U.S. speculated that there wasn't a lot of wind that day, so the flag might not have been visible from the air. So the assumption is, again, Egyptian ship just shelled the coast of Sinai, Israeli jets strafe the Liberty, and then more Israeli jets come who had been engaged with Egyptian infantry on the ground and are armed with napalm, and they napalm the U.S. Liberty. This is, no doubt, it's just a horrible event, a savage attack. But as they're carrying out this attack, they're made uneasy by the fact there's no return fire. What's going on? Could this possibly be an Israeli ship? A friendly fire incident involving Israeli ships. So they stop the attack and check. And there are no Israeli ships in the vicinity that report that they are taking fire. So it must not be an Israeli ship. So the attack continues. Still, there's this uneasiness. They look for markings again. They still don't see a flag, but someone notices that the letters on the side of the ship on the hull are Latin. They're not Arabic, as you would expect with an Egyptian ship. Now, it's possible an Egyptian ship would put Latin letters on the hull as a deceptive action, but that's unlikely. So that creates real doubt on the part of the Israelis. But then there's another series of terrible events. A squadron of Israeli torpedo boats show up. They look at the Liberty, compare it to what they have on file, and they say, wait a minute, this is the silhouette of an Egyptian freighter. This is indeed a hostile vessel. Meanwhile, on the Liberty, the captain is giving the order, do not fire on these torpedo boats. But one gunner doesn't get the order in time and does fire on the Israeli torpedo boats briefly. Then the ammunition is cooking off, so it seems as though there's more firing at the torpedo boats, and the torpedo boats are, wait a minute, here's an Egyptian ship firing at us. They request permission to engage. They reluctantly get it. They fire 5 torpedoes, and one tragically hits the Liberty, blows a huge hole in the ship, instantly killing more than 24 sailors. Now, finally, a raft from the U.S. Liberty floats out, and an Israeli torpedo boat picks it up and sees there are U.S. naval markings on this raft, and they finally realize this is a U.S. ship. Instantly, they inform and apologize to the U.S. naval attaché to put him on an Israeli helicopter, try to get him out to the Liberty. He can't land on the ship because of darkness. The torpedo boats offer assistance to the Liberty. The Liberty rejects them. It's a spy ship. It's on a sensitive mission, and all sorts of apologies from Israeli officials instantly to their counterparts in the United States, and offers to pay restitution and compensation. They realize this is a grievous mistake. So is Israel perhaps faking all this regret and deliberately carried out this attack for some reason? This doesn't make any sense on any level. On any level. First of all, Israel was desperate for U.S. support and was fearful of the Soviet Union. There's no way it was going to go out of its way to commit an act of war against its superpower partner. And by the way, the fog of war was working both ways here. The Liberty didn't realize until the end that it was being attacked by Israeli forces. Now, what are the theories for why Israel would supposedly take this enormous risk of attacking a U.S. vessel deliberately? Well, some people say it was trying to hide its gains it had made in the Sinai during the war, but it wasn't trying to hide those gains, or it was trying to keep from the United States that it was going to attack Syria. It wasn't trying to hide that from the United States either.
The reality is you're talking about 1967. Do you think communication was that good in 1967? Communication it wasn't that good in 1980s. So what's the probability that there was some sort of vast conspiracy versus fratricide?
Carried out a slaughter of Egyptian POWs and wanted to hide the truth there, so undertook this murderous cover-up against the USS Liberty. None of this adds up. None of this makes sense. But the fact is that for Israel and for the Jews, when it comes to the environment now that's been created by some right-wing influencers, the truth is not good enough, and the truth is not a defense. I'm
All right,
Lowry.
now, I'm not an expert of the USS Liberty. I don't want to be. But the reality of the point here is the ones that are creating, quote, a conspiracy theory or an alternative theory of what the official historical record shows, they need to show the proof, not just ask questions. See, this is the problem with conspiracy theorists. They just keep on asking questions, and usually they do not have answers. And they create enough doubt that then you start to discredit what their original history was. Now, that doesn't mean the original history was right. It could have been that the United States wanted to blame, somehow the Egyptians, and that the United States would get into war. Now, for primary research, one should be listening to the recordings from Johnson during this time period, what was going on months before and months after, and to understand the whole context of this. We're not going to understand the context with just what National Review just said. Now, National Review is a conservative outlet, all right? Not a liberal outlet. But it's important to stick to the facts, the veritas. Stick to the facts, not with innuendo. Stick to the facts, all right? You cannot think that a theory is proven by just questions. You can question, but you have to prove. And so if Tucker Carlson just gets up on stage, gets a lot of ad revenue, when he gets on stage, he gets paid for being on stage. Don't forget that. All right? And he promulgates BS without where's the proof. Yet when he's interviewing, when Tucker is interviewing Ted Cruz, which I dislike Ted Cruz, but I think he was unfair. When he was interviewing Ted Cruz and he said, "How dare you not know what the population of Iran is?" Ted Cruz was first in his class in Harvard Law School. Tucker Carlson didn't graduate college. Who do you think is a little bit more bright? Ted Cruz or Tucker Carlson? So the point I'm making is, when you have a hypothesis, you have to collect data to prove it. And if there's enough data, then the theory is developed. And it stays, the prevailing theory until other data may disprove it later. There is nothing that Tucker Carlson said that proves anything. He just asks questions. Now, there's nothing wrong with asking questions, but don't confuse asking questions with someone actually understanding the history. You have a little kid, 2-year-old, asking questions about nature. Does that mean he's a nuclear physicist? No. And that's exactly what Tucker Carlson did. But because there's lots of people that want to buy into it, lots of people just don't, they don't listen. Now, when it came to the crisis of 2020, everything I said, I proved. And everything that I said bared out in terms of the aftershock. Why? Because I explained it with the medical mechanisms on why things were happening. Tucker isn't doing that. Tucker didn't do that. Tucker got on the stage and asked questions. Anybody can do that. And when you do that, then people that don't know physics, don't know calculus, don't know engineering, don't know cosmology, they get up on stage and they say the world's flat. Yet they don't have any understanding of how would a massive, dense object like the Earth be flat. Just the matter would compress because of gravity in all directions and create some sort of spherical object, semi-spherical or spherical. You ever wonder why large objects in the solar system are round? It's the gravity. Amazing how that works. But these flat earthers don't understand that because they don't understand Newtonian physics or calculus. You ever wonder why smaller objects like asteroids are oblong and odd-shaped? There's a couple reasons. One, the density isn't enough. And if it was a larger object that was hit, it broke up into fragments. But big objects, they're round. You look at Jupiter, really big object. It's pretty round. You look at Pluto, smaller object, but still big. It's less round, but it's still spherical. It's not flat. Now, why is that, Dr. Paul Cottrell? Because of gravity. So the flat earthers are the same types of people where they just ask questions and they don't have any, it's almost like, sadly, because I saw this with my father when he was suffering from dementia before he died. You know, when you look at a patient that has dementia or Alzheimer's, all right, they start to have cognitive decline to the point where they can't take care of themselves, or they can't talk anymore, or they're just zoned out, or whatever. And you wonder if they're even in human existence. But in the early stages, they start saying things that don't make sense. Logic is a little discombobulated, mixed up, and then it gets worse over time. This is very similar with the whole group of individuals that are like anti-science, anti-everything. You know, the flat earther types. I'm not saying that they have dementia, but the thing is that they are not using logic to be able to build on further concepts. And then all of a sudden, you start reading about, you know what, the whole flat earther movement was some sort of trickery to try to convince people to think a certain way. And it worked through memes, through social media contagion. Beware of a person that only asks questions and doesn't have any process to answer those questions. There's nothing wrong with asking questions. But if you're just asking questions to be a cynic, that's not knowledge. And that's exactly what Tucker is doing. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. And if you slow down the aging process and improve your brain function, guess what? You won't be a stupid truther. complete multivitamin has the multivitamins that you need for proper enzymatic activity. When you have proper enzymatic activity, your cells and your tissues will perform properly. It's easy to digest. Get the multivitamin from my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and also get the probiotic. You can get it in a veggie cap or in the powdered form. I prefer the powdered because I mix it with my lunch. Now, with a good probiotic, you're going to improve your gut biome. And by improving your gut biome, you're going to improve your immune system at the gut level. You're going to be able to absorb your nutrients easier. You're reducing inflammation. You're going to be able to rev up your metabolism. Your skin will improve. You will also have better brain function. Why? A good gut biome communicates with your brain, all right? Like, you ever heard that phrase, I have a gut feeling, all right? Sometimes old sayings have a deep meaning to them, all right? Your gut, with a proper gut biome, will allow you to sleep better. When you sleep better and you get into those cycles of REM sleep and deep sleep, you're detoxifying your body, detoxifying your central nervous system. When you're detoxifying your central nervous system, you're getting rid of the garbage that your brain has accumulated, and you're consolidating memory, and you'll be well rested. So a good gut biome is actually helping brain function. People that have chronic sleep deprivation increases the chances of dementia, early onset of dementia. Not only that, by not sleeping properly, you age faster. And with a good gut biome, you're also improving your skin. So with a good gut biome, you're actually slowing down the aging process. So please take my advice, because Dr. Paul Cottrell knows a lot. I don't know everything, but what I'm saying works. Get the complete multivitamin. Get the probiotic. That's the foundation to start you on a path of good health. And it's a holistic approach. It's not just proper supplementation. It's proper diet and exercise, proper sleep, learning new things, getting into parasympathetic mode. And over time, you will notice that you're aging slower. Go to my store and get the dual purpose deodorants. You can get it in peppermint, lavender, and tea tree, or in citrus. These deodorants have no baking soda, no aluminum. They're made from essential oils from the Himalayas. They're very high quality. And it's dual purpose. They're for males and females. Take it every day as a deodorant. Use it every day as a deodorant. But it will also help to detoxify your body. And when you're detoxifying your body, you're helping your immune system and your endocrine system. And if you have a good immune system and endocrine system, guess what? You slow down the aging process. Please go to my store, use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. All right. I have very little respect of Tucker Carlson. I mean, he's just trying to promote himself. All right, let's go to Cash Jordan to find out what's going on in Chinatown in New York City, because I have a feeling things aren't right.
Take ocean farmed salmon off the table.
So I've been following Helderberg for a while now because there's something beautiful about what they do, taking something classic and rugged and making it luxurious and just aesthetically wonderful.
A constitutional right to protest. And when I'm mayor, we will protect that right.
So the new mayor of New York City has a plan to stand right in the way of federal immigration operations right here in New York. And although the city has been a sanctuary for decades, the outgoing mayor actually wanted ICE inside local jails and apartments arresting dangerous fugitives who critics say the new mayor wants to protect while making social media videos doling out blanket advice for stopping federal agents who will soon be entering an even more hostile environment.
It was just a chaotic scene that broke out here earlier today, right here on the edge of Chinatown and Soho. Dozens of demonstrators clashing with police over a possible ICE raid.
I told the president that these kinds of raids that we're seeing here in New York City, they're cruel and inhumane, and they do nothing to serve the interests of public safety. The issue is not on the following of existing sanctuary city policies.
The Trump administration is definitely concerned about the rise in violence, in attacks, in physical threats that we have seen against our brave men and women who wear the ICE uniform. Again, these are agents who are just simply doing their jobs. They are enforcing our nation's immigration laws.
Just last month, another clash broke out between protesters and law enforcement in Chinatown after ICE agents arrested vendors for selling counterfeit goods.
What I also told the president is we have the NYPD here. We trust the NYPD to deliver that public safety. We do not need ICE and the National Guard to make that same case.
Yeah, but you said that you were going to work with the president, and part of the agreement with the president is, look, I'm not going to send reinforcements if you cooperate with our ICE officials. So now you've already broke the promise.
So New York's outgoing mayor, Eric Adams, says the city is in for dark days as soon as the Mamdani agenda takes off. And nobody's talking about how this first in the nation socialist blueprint is going to take off like a rocket, and this whole city is going to be virtually unrecognizable in 12 months. But the one thing that won't be changing will be New York City's open borders agenda, which has the mission of keeping as many federal fugitives on its streets as humanly possible, even if those folks are a grave danger to the communities they've taken over, leading to unprecedented crime waves, looting, illegal vending, and gang activity. And the crazy thing is, as the incoming mayor doubles down on this whole sanctuary thing, all of it
Still think socialism is a good thing for America? And the sad thing is there's a lot of people that are capitalist, that are conservative, they have family values, but there's a subset of them that don't use logic. What I call the truthers, right? And the truthers, they're like anti-science. They're like anti-everything. They're cynics. If you go back to the Greeks, they're cynics. That's all they are. They're not Stoics. They're not, from the pedigree of Plato or Aristotle. They're cynics. But they're conservative. So they're, but the thing is that because they're not focused on the important things, like naval production, they focus on Epstein files that don't mean anything. The truthers need to know. Meanwhile, they don't even realize their house is burning down. They don't even realize that the country is devolving. Cash Jordan talks about it almost every day in New York. Almost every day. But where's Tucker Carlson? He's more worried about the USS Liberty of 1967. What about 2025, Tucker? What about 2026, Tucker? What about 2027, where there's a high probability of going to war with China, Tucker?
With the affordability agenda he got elected on, because with an estimated 500,000 illegal immigrants calling New York City their home, one has to wonder what would happen to apartment prices here if folks who break America's laws were not able to rent them. Plus, if 500,000 jobs open up, companies would be forced to raise wages for struggling New Yorkers and pay them more money. And many a Mamdani voter will be shocked when they learn protect protecting federal fugitives here is actually more important than making things affordable for those who obey the law. Which brings us to the real reason the federal government has promised to increase ICE activity in New York City. As we've been learning, fraud and crime plunder billions of dollars from America in a whole myriad of ways, and it has to stop. And where does this money come from? It comes from those who obey the law and play by the rules, both citizens and immigrants alike. But that money is redistributed in the form of state and federal benefits, in some cases to folks who are here without permission and are essentially stealing. On top of that, when you realize dangerous gangs like Tren de Aragua have embedded themselves in sanctuaries like New York, the organized crime that pours out of these cities does not improve our country from within, that's for sure. Meanwhile, the presence of every illegal fugitive here just tempts cartels and gangs to continue trying to exploit our borders so they can make money. Meanwhile, right now, New York City's jails are full of fugitives who aren't even supposed to be here in this country, but the city wants to keep them in those jails and on our streets for some reason.
We're seeing that these criminal legal aliens are exiting the jails and going back onto New York or Chicago or these other sanctuary streets to re-perpetuate their crimes. Today, in New York City's jails are 7,169 criminal illegal aliens.
This is so stupid because, you know, another thing the mayor has said he really wants to do is decrease the incarcerated population in New York City. And you know what a great way to do that is? Let ICE come to the jail and do it for you. It'll be free. America will be safer. Less people in jail. Everyone wins. But no, we've got to stand up for the rights of fugitives because we're a sanctuary, even though everybody knows that's a bad idea.
Chaos here on Canal Street. The scammers don't even respect the police. Oh, what are you guys mad about? The scammers just recognize me.
He was upset about
So you think
our job.
we need to be vending though, right? It's not.
I don't sell.
You're saying you don't sell? Are you kidding me? Look at all your friends out here. They're all sellers. Okay. Now we got NYPD. Don't be my trash.
So allegedly, the people selling things on the streets in Canal Street, they're engaging in an illegal activity. The sanctuary police can't do anything to stop the illegal activity. They can't enforce immigration law. And when ICE shows up and stages a raid in this neighborhood, the mobs just pour out of their apartment buildings and towers and go right after them. But this is a great example of how New York City disenfranchises its law-abiding. For example, how does a business in this neighborhood operate and pay their rent if people can't get into the business because there's so much illegal activity on the sidewalk, no one can get through the front door? How does that work? But remember that 7,000 number in New York City's jails? Keep that in mind as you see what you're about to see.
I told the president that
unleash your child's inner math person with Brilliant. It's an effective and fun way to learn, built for the way students' minds actually work. Every lesson is visual and interactive, so the math makes sense. You can touch it.
I told the president that these kinds of raids that we're seeing here in New York City, they're cruel and inhumane, and they do nothing to serve the interests of public safety. And
they're cruel and inhumane? They're here illegally. What part of illegal does he not get? If you're here illegally, you don't deserve to be here. You, period. Well, you know, it looks bad. Well, why don't they just get the hell out? They know they're here illegally. They assume that someone is going to let it just slide and just sweep it under the rug. And here's a classic example, a Marxist. Even Karl Marx came from a wealthy family, and he wanted to be just an intellectual, just thought. And so he writes books. And he wrote about how bad capitalism was, even though he came from wealth. And how the production should be in the hands of the people and not the capitalists. So here, out of the wisdom of the New Yorker, Mondani gets elected. And he's not even mayor yet, and the city's starting to crumble. He becomes mayor officially in January. And sadly, you know what brought this up? Too many liberal Jews that lost their way and are socialists. And the youth that feel as though there's no future for them. Those two together is what brought Mamdani into the mayoralship.
And now as a mayor-elect, I'm also still the assembly member.
Okay, so the mayor says he doesn't want the raids. And you know who else doesn't want the raids? ICE. ICE doesn't want the raids either. In fact, they're not even raids. These are targeted enforcement operations. They don't go out on the streets to do something without a purpose. They always have an intended fugitive that they're after. They know where that person is, and that's where they're headed. But ICE doesn't want to do that either. ICE doesn't want to walk down Fifth Avenue and make arrests. They don't want to do that. They don't want to go into an apartment where there's a whole bunch of people living with weapons to extract somebody who might themselves be armed. They don't want that. But this is a sanctuary city, and since ICE can't go into the jails and arrest 7,000 people right now and get them off the streets and out of the country permanently because they're here without permission, they got to do it the hard way. It's sad. And guess what? The mayor can now say, see, ICE is wrong. But they have to do it the way that he doesn't approve of. You see how this works? Create a law that makes things worse and then blame the people whose job it is to keep the whole country safe.
What I told the president in our meeting was that the issue is not on the following of existing sanctuary city policies, which allows for the city to work together with the federal government on those who have been convicted of 170 serious crimes.
I am so glad this came up because it almost sounds like New York City's sanctuary.
New York should never get federal money to support illegals. Period. Never, ever, ever, ever. Trump needs to have a backbone and basically say, New York, state and city, you're getting zero federal dollars to help support sanctuary cities.
Us are not a problem, and New York City is allowed to work with the federal government, but you see, federal law, now that we have the Lake and Riley Act, requires any illegal immigrant in America who has been accused of or convicted of a crime to be held in ICE custody. So if people have not been convicted of a crime and they're in a local jail, ICE is supposed to detain those people. But it gets even worse when you look at this idea of being convicted. New York City actually stopped publishing its dashboard amid slipping convictions. Look at this, just 35% of felony cases ended in convictions last year, and that is down from 37% the year before and 40% the year before. So our conviction rates here are an absolute joke. We might have a whole bunch of serious crimes where local police are allowed to cooperate with ICE, but if nobody gets convicted of them, well, I guess these are all just innocent men. And that's why the Lake and Riley Act was written the way that it was. If people are accused of a crime and they're here illegally, ICE has a role to play. What that does is that holds these jurisdictions that release everybody and convict nobody accountable for their sanctuary mayhem. But there's another issue at hand here. All of this rhetoric about how to resist ICE and how what they're doing is wrong and how they don't serve the public interest one bit and how this all needs to stop and how they're persecuting New Yorkers. Well, I mean, that's having a predictable effect on the federal agents that put on a uniform every single day to keep you and I safe.
City Mayor-elect Mamdani put out a video recently telling immigrants in New York City they have the right to stand up to ICE. Are you concerned this will inspire New York City residents to resist ICE operations, and what will the Trump administration do if this happens?
The Trump administration is definitely concerned about the rise in violence and attacks and physical threats that we have seen against our brave men and women who wear the ICE uniform.
And there have been a lot of threats. The last time ICE was here, the city went absolutely berserk, and they came here after people who were documenting the whole Canal Street, illegal immigration, counterfeit selling of items connection were attacked and were assaulted and had the whole thing on camera. Nick Shirley documented this, and then the raids came. And the White House has reason to be very concerned here. We have a mayor who got elected on an anti-Trump open borders agenda by massive majorities. There's a large base of people here that want to resist ICE. We've already seen the protests. We've already seen the riots. And there are some people who think that once the new mayor gets in, this is all just going to surge through the roof.
Their rights, and I can't think of a more American thing to do than to speak about the protections that we all have under the law. My responsibility is to do the work necessary to ensure that that doesn't take place. What I also told the president is we have the NYPD here. We trust the NYPD to deliver that public safety. We do not need ICE and the National Guard to make that same case.
Yeah, but you said that you were going to work with the president.
I turned a career plateau into progress with the CMA. CMA Confidence Certified.
Yeah, but you said that you were going to work with the president, and part of the agreement with the president is, look, I'm not going to send reinforcements if you cooperate.
And it sounds like that's not going to happen. And to come out and say that the NYPD has this under control, I mean, what a joke of a statement that is. Look, I totally support the NYPD. We got a lot of brave men and women who are...
Not only that, Mandani wants to defund the police. So if he trusts them so much, why is he defunding them? Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Help support the work that I do, because the only way to save this country is to be informed and to push back against the crazy socialists. Omega-3 will help with your cardiovascular health, so you don't have a heart attack while you're watching Mandani, on the 11 o'clock news. Omega-3 brings down inflammation, helps to control your lipid profile, and reduce plaque formation. In addition, Omega-3 helps to reduce the stickiness of your red blood cells to prevent overclotting. Take Omega-3 every day, super important for your cardiovascular health. Good Night Formula has tryptophan, melatonin, GABA, and passion flower to allow you to get into 3 to 5 cycles of REM sleep and deep sleep, so you're detoxifying your central nervous system, consolidating memory, and being well rested. When you do this regularly, you slow down the aging process. Super important. See, if you don't consolidate memory by being in deep sleep and REM cycle sleep, you don't develop memories. It's that simple. All right. If you ever try to remember something, and then all of a sudden it's hard until after you sleep, and then it's easier to retrieve, that's because it has to consolidate while you're in deep sleep. But if you are chronically sleep deprived, don't be surprised that you get Swiss cheese brain later in life. Please go to my store and get the Good Night Formula. You pay attention to people that have good sleep, regular sleep, they age slower. Resveratrol. I've been taking resveratrol for decades. It soaks up free radicals, helps the health of your mitochondria. You'll have more energy, more ATP. Resveratrol helps with youthful gene expression and helps to get rid of cells that are in senescence. Resveratrol also helps the basal layer of your skin to improve your skin. You take resveratrol regularly, guess what? You slow down the aging process. If you stack it with C60, you slow down even more. Use discount 5, you get $5 off. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. If you follow my lead and take the supplements I'm taking, you're going to slow down the aging process. It's that simple. And it's not rocket science. Bring down inflammation, soak up free radicals.
Overworked and persecuted by the local population here, who put on that uniform every single day, and our hats go off to them, but they do not have this city under control. They've got the lowest force they've had in 30 years. They can't seem to hire their way out of this mess. They're losing veteran officers. That force deteriorates every single day. It's not the fault of the officers. It's the fault of the environment they live in. And if the mobs are going to come out in full force, crime is just going to explode in the city. Because if you take the NYPD, from their patrols, you take them out of the subway, you take them out of Penn Station and Grand Central, you take them out of neighborhoods and you send them all to some massive uprising somewhere. All those neighborhoods are unguarded, and you're going to have crime waves popping up all over the city as criminals spot areas of opportunity.
National Guard and ICE as a result.
The NYPD does not have access to what ICE has access to, what
Right.
Patrol has access to, what the DHS has access to. The NYPD has their hands full.
Right.
So now they got to worry about illegal immigrants, transnational gangsters, and terrorists. That's where the federal government comes in.
Right.
So Zilber and Madani's pretending like the NYPD is built for that. They're not built for that.
No, they're not. It's frightening. They're not built for it. They don't have the tools to take on criminals who came to this country.
Mamdani is too inexperienced. He has never worked a day in his, adulthood life. He's another one of these coddled individuals that believes in socialism and Marxism. These pseudo-intellectuals that are lazy. It is shocking that New York allowed a piece of shit like this to end up being mayor.
They are supported by a vast network that may stretch to countries like Venezuela. But on top of that, there's another reason why nobody should trust the NYPD. And again, this is not the fault of the officers themselves. As far as convictions go, the prosecutor, Alvin Bragg in Manhattan, they do win convictions 66% of the time when it's a charge downgraded to a misdemeanor or a non-criminal violation. And the number of felonies they just refuse to prosecute has nearly doubled. So they're not winning felony convictions. They're downgrading felonies to misdemeanors, which 66% of the time they get a conviction. But look at this, 7% of the felonies, 8% in 2023, 12% of felonies in 2024, they just said, yeah, we're not going to prosecute that, even though it's a felony. So you have people who were arrested for committing a felony. There was evidence of that, and the district attorney said, let them go.
Work together. Everyone's got different expertise. So this guy is doubling and tripling down. When he said, what is more American than telling, I should help him with this, than helping helping somebody who got here illegally how to stay here illegally. That's the way.
That's the American way.
Looking in between his words, what he's really saying, illegal immigrants should stay.
I love it. He's just so emotional. I just can't think of anything more American than to tell illegals who broke the law that are not Americans how to evade ICE. And also
right. And that's what's so stupid about this. And the border czar has been very clear. If you don't have a border, you don't have a country. So by default, it is American to enforce America's laws and to enforce and secure America's border. People have to come through that border the right way. If people are living in New York City illegally, they have not come in the right way. It is not the American way to try and help them evade capture by the federal government and consequences for their actions. Americans understand that if you break the law, there should be a consequence. We are a nation of laws and order, exploiting our laws, throwing them away, not letting fugitives face any kind of
It doesn't matter who came up with this design. I bet 99% of people have never seen anything like it. When you're doing outdoor sports in winter, the cold wind freezes your head, face, and ears. This windproof hat has a thick fleece lining that keeps you fully warm, and its ear covering design blocks wind and dust. Perfect for all cycling conditions and outdoor activities. Warm, safe, and essential for staying protected from the cold. With a huge discount, it's now half price. The link I shared includes free.
Fugitives face any kind of repercussion for the horrible things they do in New York. Setting criminals free, that's dumb. That's not American at all, but New York City does that every single day. And there's nothing affordable about any of this either, which is the thing that most New Yorkers voted for Mr. Mamdani for. They want him to come in and lower prices. But how do you do that? How do you enfranchise workers in this city if they have to compete for an employment opportunity with somebody who's not supposed to be in America? How do they fight for the wages that they deserve in the job market if they're competing with people who've broken America's laws and are cheating the system. On top of that, every dollar of local welfare given to somebody who's not supposed to be here that might help them pay for an apartment or pay for groceries means there are now less resources for legal residents, less apartments, and apartment vacancies here are 1%. 1% of New York City's apartments can be rented right now. That's a housing crisis. There are so many people living here. We don't have enough apartments for people who want to move. And then we've got the city-run grocery stores idea, which a lot of people got very excited about. But here's the question. Every time city-run grocery stores pop up in other parts of the country, they can't seem to stock their shelves. What happens when these grocery stores have trouble keeping items in stock, like the city-run grocery stores everywhere else do? Really, a sanctuary agenda is a lawless agenda. And when you pursue lawlessness, it happens at the expense of the law abiding. People who do the right thing, people who obey the rules, those people are having the American.
And the sad thing is the nonprofits are helping this out. They're helping the sanctuary cities. They take donor money and subsidize these illegals.
Been stolen from them. They voted for an affordability agenda to try and get it back, and it's never going to happen. In fact, by the new mayor saying, hey, that he wants to freeze rents for all of the rent-stabilized apartments in the city. Well, everybody that doesn't live in a rent-stabilized apartment, their rent just went up because most buildings have some rent-stabilized apartments and some market-rate apartments, and if landlords can't get the rent over here, they're going to have to plunder it from their market-rate tenants, and they're going to get away with it because we're in a housing crisis. Nothing about this city is affordable. That's not going to change anytime soon. What do you think about that? I will see you in the next video.
Hello, my name is Alexander Yermak. Until 2022, I was a musician, and now I am a soldier. In this war, I meet the best people of my life, brave ones. We defend freedom like no one else, using brains, innovation, and technologies.
All right, let's listen into this. IRS predicts refund explosion as Trump tax cuts take effect. Well, that would be good for Americans. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the vitamin B complex. If you're 40 years of age or older, you need to be taking vitamin B complex. Why? The first 4 B vitamins helps the electron transport chain within your mitochondria, so you're producing ATP. When you get older, you produce less ATP. You need to help your mitochondria to produce it. Take the vitamin B complex to do that. If you notice that people that are older, they don't have energy, well, that's because they have less ATP and their mitochondria sucks. So by taking vitamin B complex, you're helping the health of your mitochondria and you're producing more ATP. Vitamin B complex also revs up your metabolism. When you have a better metabolism, you have more energy. And vitamin B complex has B12, which will help to protect your neurons, which are going to be really important when you get older. Digestive enzyme complex, super important to take, especially if you're 40 years of age or older. Why? Because this will reduce the load on your pancreas when you're digesting. It will help to break up carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids, reduce stress of digestion, and allow you to absorb your nutrients properly. If you're an athlete, younger or older, you will benefit from digestive enzyme complex. Why? Because when you're an athlete, you're taking pre and post-workout fuel source, and you need to digest it. This will help to digest it. And digestive enzyme complex has bromelain, which breaks up clots. That's going to help with your cardiovascular health. And digestive enzyme complex has proteolytic enzymes to break up glycoproteins, especially important during the winter season. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the digestive enzyme complex. Let's listen in on what's going on with the IRS.
Need to find the best way to learn math? It's brilliant.org. Brilliant's an effective and fun way to learn, built for the way your mind actually works. Every lesson is visual
substantial refunds to working American households. In the first quarter, we're going to see very substantial 100 to 150 billion of refunds in the first quarter go directly to Americans' pockets.
What we're seeing is that the people who have no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security, all of those folks didn't have their forms changed this year because the IRS didn't have time to do it because we passed the bill in July. And so they're going to get huge tax refunds in the first and second half of the year.
Under these cuts, many families will be saving between $11,000 and $20,000 a year. And next spring is projected to be the largest tax refund season of all time.
Well, the Trump administration out in full force.
But the socialists hate that because they want to take your money. They want to give it to social programs. They want you to give your money to the government to give to the Somalis.
Largest tax refund for American families in history come 2026. The White House predicting Americans will be saving thousands of dollars on the back of new investments into America. The big, beautiful bill making the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act permanent. Joining now is the first CEO of the Internal Revenue Service and the Commissioner of the Social Security Administration, Frank Bisignano. Frank, great to see you again. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
So what about this refund? The president says it's going to be the best refund season ever. What should we expect?
Well, we should expect exactly what the president said, as always happens. And, you know, the great leadership of the Treasury Secretary has positioned us to be able to deliver in a whole bunch of ways for America. You know, you're going to look at probably 94% plus of middle-class Americans getting a boost. You'll look at tax rates coming down and getting the benefit going forward. You see all our Social Security recipients getting up to a $6,000 benefit as he committed to the benefits of Social Security not being taxed. It'll be the biggest refunds that we've ever seen. And it's all, you know, because of the president's leadership and the Treasury Secretaries under one beautiful bill, which is unparalleled. Obviously, we also have the Trump accounts, which we were fortunate to unveil and continue to communicate, and that'll be ready for July 4th. And you see great Americans like Michael Dell contributing to it. So we're just blessed and fortunate to have the president's leadership and the Treasury Secretaries and have the ability to execute on it.
Absolutely, Frank. And I'm glad you mentioned the Trump accounts because the IRS adding a new form allowing legal guardians to sign up for new Trump accounts for eligible U.S. citizens. The Trump accounts feature a $1,000 investment into stocks and ETFs for American citizens born between 2025 and 2028. I love this idea, Frank. The money remaining tax-free until withdrawal at age 18, with contributions allowed from employers and parents. Frank, this is so important because it teaches kids how to save and invest from a very young age. I would imagine it's going to have an effect on the entire country and our financial independence.
Yes, I think it's one of the most amazing pieces of tax work ever done. And if you think about it, $1,000 today will be worth $500,000 at age 60. You know, remember, Treasury will be funding $1,000 in the pilot program during this administration for newborns. I have to say my favorite part is the form that IRS has put together with the direction of Treasury. 4547, that'll be the form. Guidance will be out on it, and we plan on being prepared on July 4th to execute against the Trump accounts.
I love that. 4547 is great. So, Frank, is there anything that you can tell us about our taxes this year, given the big, beautiful bill? Is there anything that we should be doing differently, that we should understand about the impact of the big, beautiful bill in 26?
Well, I think it's, you know, it's a technical process. And expectations should be that in most categories, people will get a benefit. And if you're not seeing that occurring, I think it's important to spend time and go through it. You know, with the middle class, like I said, 90+% getting a tax benefit. It'll also affect your deductions in the following year in 26, and I think it's important to take a look at that also.
Frank, the New York Post is reporting that IRS criminal investigators played a pivotal, important role in tracking down the Brown University shooter. Wow, congratulations to your team. They ultimately led the FBI and other law enforcement agencies right to the shooter. The IRS criminal investigation team began combing through his financial records after a homeless Reddit poster hero named John helped authorities identify who turned out to be Claudio Neves Valente. The suspect was proven difficult to trace after he was identified because he used European SIM cards and a gizmo that made it harder to track phones. But a senior official told the Post that at that point, the criminal investigations team became involved and determined where he had obtained the storage facility in which he was ultimately located. Once the location was identified, they issued an alert to the FBI with the information on where he could be found. Frank, what can you tell us about your incredible team that helped find this shooter?
You know, yesterday I had the opportunity to congratulate the approximately dozen people who some volunteered on the ground as soon as it occurred to go there and engage while the shooter was there. Those are signs of all the great Americans we have working within the federal government. I also would say under Treasury Secretary Bessent, he had made it very clear that we will always deploy against missions using all the skills we have in the criminal investigation unit and the compliance unit. And people deployed, people engaged and worked. You know, in this government, we work across the government very, very well because of the leadership of President Trump and encouraging teamwork, and we were able to play our part as helping the investigation and actually finding the location.
That is incredible. I love to see a whole of government where each area can actually pitch in, but we weren't expecting the IRS to do this great work, and your team did it. Thank you to your team for that. Commissioner, the Office of the Inspector General just completed an audit of the Social Security Administration, finding improvements under your leadership. Your staff served 68 million callers. That is an increase of 65% from last year. Frank, congratulations. We knew your resume going into this would be so perfect to actually clean things up. What are your priorities going into the new year, Frank?
Well, I think first of all, as you can see here, I have the Inspector General's report, and you know, it's right here. And I just read the first paragraph. SSA's publicly reported National 800 number of telephone metrics were accurate, and its overall telephone service performance improved in full year 2025. In full year 2025, SSA served either by SSA employee or automation 68 million callers, as you said, a 65% increase. This audit was derived because Senator Warren refused to acknowledge the work being done by the good career people of Social Security. And I brought to her office a 3-level down manager who, Tiffany Countess, who runs the phone centers, and she explained it to her, and she did not want to believe it. So we agreed to have an audit. And she continued to say the phone service was a mess. The audit was done by the Inspector General and proved that we served more Americans, 65% than the last administration. We also answered the phone significantly more timely and drove wait times in field offices down and drove disability claims pending down by 35%. So it was quite satisfying to have the truth told, even though the senator will never want to tell the truth.
Well, I'm really happy about that. So, Senator, if you're watching, thank you for the audit, okay? Thank you for the audit so that we can actually come out and talk about it.
Please go to my store and get the Clarity Factor. Clarity Factor will get rid of that brain fog and allow you to concentrate on tasks at work or in school or at home. This will get rid of that brain fog. You're going to be able to focus and over time improve your neuroplasticity. You're going to have positive neuroplasticity where your dendritic connections will connect more. You're going to be able to think faster and you're going to have better memory. Get the Clarity Factor. This is a very powerful neurostack. Take it every day. Drink it with filtered water. And also get the heirloom barley. Heirloom barley will help to detoxify your body, bring down inflammation, and soak up free radicals through superoxide dismutase. When you do this regularly, you're slowing down the aging process. Why? You're soaking up free radicals, you're bringing down inflammation, you're detoxifying. When you're detoxifying and bringing down inflammation, you're helping your immune system and your endocrine system. You're also helping with joint health. A lot of people, when they're older, they have aches and pains. Guess what? That's inflammation. Also, by bringing down inflammation at the vascular level, you're reducing plaque formation. By bringing down inflammation at the cerebral level, you're maintaining the health of your neurons. This will slow down the aging process. Take it every day. Stack it with Clarity Factor. So you're helping with your brain, you're helping get your body healthy, and improving your immune system and your endocrine system. Please go to my store, use discount 5, get $5 off any order. You spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. All right, let's listen into CNA about Trump-class battleships.
Well, Trump has unveiled plans for the U.S. Navy to build a new class of heavily armed battleships. The so-called Trump-class vessels are being billed as the biggest, fastest, and most powerful warships America has ever built. President Trump says production will start with 2 vessels with plans for a fleet of up to 25. The first ship to be christened the USS Defiant. He says the vessels, each weighing more than 30,000 tons, will be equipped with nuclear-capable systems, hypersonic missiles, and laser weapons, and will serve as flagships of a revamped U.S. quote, Golden Fleet.
They'll help maintain American military supremacy, revive the American shipbuilding industry, and inspire fear in America's enemies all over the world. We want respect. We're going to have it. We already have it.
Mr. Trump also revealing that South Korea's Hanwha will work closely with the U.S. Navy. A deal to cut U.S. tariffs last month, committing Seoul to substantial shipbuilding investments in the United States. President Trump denying that naval upgrading aims to counter China, maintaining it is instead about peace through strength. Decades of U.S. maritime domination increasingly challenged by China's rapidly expanding navy. According to the Center for Strategic and International Studies, China, in terms of ship numbers, has outnumbered the U.S. Navy since 2014. Beijing now operates the world's largest fleet with about 234 combat ships. The U.S., however, still holds a decisive edge in global reach and firepower. It operates 11 nuclear-powered aircraft carriers. That compares with China's 3, which are all conventionally powered. For now, the U.S. remains the world's most powerful naval force. But on shipbuilding, China already holds more than 53% of the commercial industry.
I think one of the biggest problems for the United States is the lack of shipbuilding capabilities. So the United States are now needing to have more collaboration with Japan and South Korea to support its shipbuilding capability. And the second bigger question is that even though the United States still have the bigger naval forces, the United States Navy is all over. They are now busy with Venezuela. So the Chinese naval forces are concentrated in South China Sea, East China Sea. So if you look at the Western Pacific, then the balance of power between the United States and China is not really very stable.
China, meantime, has rejected U.S. claims that it is engaged in a nuclear arms race, calling instead on Washington to fulfill its own responsibilities on nuclear disarmament. Beijing's response follows a draft Pentagon report warning of China's expanding military ambitions and what it described as a lack of interest in arms control talks. Nick Harper's covering this story for CNN Live from Washington, D.C. Nick, this being President Trump, he's touting this plan, not just the lethality of weapons on these ships, but also what he says, thousands of jobs that will be created in the domestic industry. The critics, though, they're skeptical.
Well, that's right, Wes. I mean, we've heard here from the US president that really this is all about not just strengthening the US fleet around the world, but boosting manufacturing here in the US, creating all of those jobs, spurring on the economy, all the type of things that the US president wants to be able to do. But as you mentioned, some real questions as to whether or not this is not just workable, but whether it's what the United States actually needs. Some of the questions being raised are the timeline for all of this. Donald Trump predicting that they could get 2 ships into the water within the next couple of years, but some analysts suggesting that it could take much longer than that. Then there's the costs. It's not clear how much it would cost to create just one of these battleships. Some analysts putting the figure at perhaps about $10 billion to design it, to build it, and to deploy it. But really the biggest thing is whether or not these are the type of battleships that the United States actually needs. Now, the US fleet has been in decline for some years, and the battleship of this size, of this magnitude, was essentially mothballed back in the 1990s because the feeling was it was not quite right for modern warfare or modern deterrence. And we have heard from analysts suggesting that these type of ships, enormous battleships, are simply not going to be needed to counter China. What you need instead is smaller ships and more of them positioned around the world. One person in particular, Mark Montgomery, a retired rear admiral, simply saying that they were too big, the wrong types of ships, and suggesting that other types of vessels were needed when it comes to trying to counter China.
Apart from size, Nick, these vessels will also come equipped with nuclear cruise missiles, which could in principle violate non-proliferation treaties that the US has signed with Russia. How is Washington planning to navigate that?
Well, that's right. Donald Trump spoke about essentially the lethality of these ships, saying that they would be 100 times more powerful than any battleship that the United States has ever built. There is that signal that this is all about trying to counter China, but he was asked specifically on that, and he said, really, it was about countering everyone, sending that message to adversaries that the US is ramping up production and creating a much bigger, much more powerful naval fleet. But there are 2 events next year which could be pivotal to all of this. We'll have in February the expiration of a US-Russia nuclear agreement, the New START deal. Now that may not get renewed, and then in April the US will be hosting a review conference looking at non-proliferation of nuclear weapons. The US trying to show that it's doing what it can, but the fears are that if New START expires and if these battleships get onto the water, it could create that 3-way arms race between the US, Russia, and China. But of course, the US is arguing really this is about deterrence. It's about strength through peace, offering these battleships, putting them on the water, but really the own goal being there to deter adversaries rather than using these battleships against them.
Oh, thanks. And Nick Harper there covering this story for CNN Live from Washington, D.C.
See, I told you it works.
Yeah, but does it work for someone who's in $20,000 debt? What about $50,000 in debt?
Yeah, it works even if they have $100,000 in debt. In fact, the more debt they have, the more money they can save.
Show me.
Jamie in California was struggling with over $29,000 of credit card debt and was able to negotiate it down to $15,000, saving $14,000. Okay?
Let's see here. Let's listen into Times Radio about
It would increase the flow of migrants, I think we can say. That fact, or that interpretation at least, lends credence to my perspective that this was never really thought through, this policy of maximum pressure on Maduro.
What's going on with Venezuela? There's another ship chase taking place in the Atlantic Ocean. American naval vessels are pursuing an oil tanker off the coast of Venezuela. The US has already seized 2 vessels, saying they were trying to evade sanctions. Venezuela says it will retaliate. Some of the neighbors are now anxious. Well, Matthew Breiser is a former US ambassador and a White House official, and he's here to talk us through this. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Bill. Nice to be with you.
Well, great to have you on. What is this all about? You know, I've seen it going on for weeks now, but what is actually happening? Where is it leading, do you think?
I think what it has evolved into is an attempt by President Trump to overthrow Maduro, the leader of Venezuela. But for many weeks, people have been wondering the same question, and it hasn't been clear, because initially when President Trump said the objectives of all this pressure on Venezuela is to cut the flow of drugs, specifically originally fentanyl, into the United States, and to cut the flow of migrants into the U.S. But no fentanyl really comes to the United States from Venezuela. I mean, that comes from Mexico with Chinese precursor chemicals. Venezuela produces or is the transit point for a lot of cocaine, which propped up the Maduro regime, but that cocaine doesn't come to the United States generally either. So as the pressure has increased week after week, it seems clearer and clearer that President Trump's goal was to try to overthrow Maduro. And in fact, President Trump's chief of staff admitted as much in an article in the magazine Vanity Fair that was published last week.
We'll come back to whether that's a really bad idea or not. But can he do this with this kind of blockade?
Whether it will succeed, it really depends upon the psychology of Maduro. A blockade in this case, it's a selective blockade, and President Trump has said it aims to curtail the export via sanctioned tankers of Venezuelan oil. If this blockade does cut off the flow of Venezuelan oil, that could be economically crippling for Venezuela. It actually would be economically crippling. I mean, already the Venezuelan economy has collapsed more or less in a way that's unheard of in peacetime in the 20th and 21st centuries. And if you cut off all of the exports of oil, there's really no or very little revenue for the Venezuelan government. So that's enormous pressure on Maduro, who's already not popular. He lost the last election in 2024 by a landslide, but refused to leave power. So that could be sufficient pressure to catalyze some sort of an uprising against him. But who knows if that's what will happen? And he may respond with repression and or just be stubborn and stay in power.
And if that did happen, one of the consequences presumably would be, a mass sort of departure of, as happens with any broken state, of migrants, many of whom would be trying to get into the US. So in terms of the original goals as spelled out by Donald Trump, it may not sort of have an effect on fentanyl, but it could increase the flow of migrants.
I very much agree with you, GETTR. Yes.
Whether you're a professional technician or simply take pride in maintaining your own cars, Harbor Freight offers quality auto tools to meet your every need at prices that can't be beat. Harbor Freight, your automotive destination.
I very much agree with you, GETTR. Yes, it would increase the flow of migrants, I think we can say. That fact, or that interpretation at least, lends credence to my perspective that this was never really thought through, this policy of maximum pressure on Maduro. If you go to the beginning of the Trump administration, there was an initiative by one of Trump's senior advisors, Ambassador Rick Grenell, to Venezuela, where he met with the leadership and came back with some Americans who had been imprisoned in Venezuela. And it looked like then the initial Trump approach is going to be one of trying to negotiate and in a, let's say, softer way. And then everything changed. And it seems to have changed when Secretary of State and National Security Advisor Marco Rubio became stronger within the administration, and his family immigrated to the U.S. from Cuba. His parents did, and Cuba is a key ally of Maduro, and Cuba's current regime is able to stay in power largely on the basis of the oil it receives at a huge discount from Venezuela. So the whole objective changed, the whole rationale changed. But as you point out, because the whole process wasn't thought through and consistent in a logical way, now you've got this additional inconsistency of a broken Venezuelan state undermining one of the key U.S. stated objectives.
And that's why some of the neighbors are getting very anxious. I think Brazil have, been quite explicit warning about a humanitarian catastrophe and mass emigration and all that. How anxious are they?
Yeah, they are anxious in Colombia too. I mean, there's been a very large, or several million, or a couple of million Venezuelans who have moved into Colombia for the time being. And yeah, I think there is that sort of material concern about refugee flows on the part of the neighbors of Venezuela. And I also think there's a legacy concern about the U.S. history of interventions in Latin America. I mean, also, as you said, a former professional diplomat, and would like to think the best of our foreign policy, but it's true that the U.S. has intervened throughout the last 2 centuries repeatedly in Latin America and prompted regime change in several cases. And often those interventions, I think like this one, were more emotional than strategic. There's a sense in whoever the president's mind is that the U.S. needs to get rid of this quote-unquote bad guy. Why? Well, you can come up with all sorts of justifications, but often it's an emotional response stemming from a sense that the Western Hemisphere is to be dominated by the United States, and there should be no hostile forces, whether they be external or internal, that threaten stability. And that.
So, for the ones that have been paying attention to me about the longing of oil and natural gas, the oil has been ticking up a little bit. It's trading at 58.12, and it looks like it may start going down again. So what I did was I closed out a position, and I'm waiting for it to retrace, and then I'm going to go back in. So I'm longing oil, but I closed out 2 positions, and then I'm going to go back in, waiting for a good entry point. Right now, oil's trading at 58.10. What's going on? Not sure why it died out. Let's listen about the fraud by Tim Waltz.
Teaching your kid math doesn't have to be a struggle. Brilliant's an effective and fun way to learn, built for the way students' minds actually work. Every lesson is visual and interactive, so the math makes sense. You can touch it.
Hey, Minnesota, have no fear. Attorney General Keith Ellison is here, apparently saving taxpayers from the now notorious scammers only a day late and a couple of $1 billion short. Listen.
Scammers think Minnesotans are easy targets. They are wrong.
When scammers go after our seniors, students, or families, I step in fast and we shut them down.
This year, I fought predatory lenders, student loan scams, fake utility callers, and online frauds that steal people's savings.
The self-dubbed savior may want to talk to the state's mayors because nearly 100 of them have penned a scathing letter to Minnesota leadership flagging that, quote, fraud, unchecked spending, and inconsistent fiscal management in St. Paul have trickled down to our cities, reducing our capacity to plan responsibly.
Joining us now is National Review Editor-in-Chief Rich Lowry and podcast host Ben Ferguson. Gentlemen, great to see you. Rich, this is just dripping. It's not ironic. It's just fraud. The fraud continues. His fraud, Ellison's fraud, and the governor's fraud is that they were actually complicit in the fraud that went on. Ellison was caught on tape dealing with some of the fraudsters, and then later got campaign funds from them. I mean, it's just that the governor himself was berating whistleblowers who were warning him about the fraud going on for years, literally for years, and he didn't listen. I mean, that's the fraud here.
Oh, absolutely. This is so galling on so many levels. Estimated number now up to $9 billion. That's almost the entire annual GDP of Somalia. You had fraud tourists knowing that Minnesota was an easy mark. So if you wanted to fraud the taxpayer, you went there to take advantage of the opportunity. And this is a classic, David. You know, we're old enough to be old Tom Wolfe fans, but he wrote a book called Mau-Mauing the Flag Catchers. That was a idiosyncratic way to say Mau-Mauing was using racial politics to get what you wanted from City Hall and from city officials. And that's part of what happened here, because when the initial suspicions arose, you had these organizations say, well, you better not ask questions about us because we're minorities and that's wrong and racist, and we'll sue you and we'll smear you in the press. And it apparently did work for some time to keep this scam going. Thank goodness it's now been stopped, but it's the work of federal prosecutors out there, not the state officials.
But Ben, I just want to highlight, going back to this fraud, which was just so terrible. It's been called the worst fraud related to COVID in the country. The funds were actually meant to feed children, help adults who are recovering addicts, help disabled adults just get by and live day to day, and yet it became a target for fraud. And as if having the federal prosecutors discover this, uncover it, hold folks accountable is not enough. Apparently the mayors in the state now don't have enough faith in their own state leaders that they are additionally pleading in that letter today, please take this seriously in St. Paul, in their state capital.
Yeah, look, I think what you're seeing from this governor is he's actually in on it. I think he knew the fraud was going on. I think he was too afraid of losing votes in the Somali community. That's why he deliberately looked the other way. And that's why he's a part of the cover-up now. He's not trying to expose this or lock anybody up. That's why he put out this ignorant tweet. It said, quote, scammers thought Minnesotans were easy targets. They were wrong. From student loan scams to fake utility callers, we shut them down this year. I go back to what Rich said. I can literally give you 9 billion reasons why that tweet is a lie. And if you have a man in charge of a state who is sitting there covering up the corruption, it's because he's a part of it. And he doesn't want to lose votes in the Somali community. I agree that part of this was the issue of racism, right? You can't question us. We're going to say you're racist. But what Democrats in the leadership of Minnesota, they clearly made a calculated political decision. We do not want the money to stop going, even if it's going to terrorist organizations overseas, because we can't lose the entire Somali community vote. It's too big. It's too important for us on Election Day. It is too powerful. Yeah. So what you're witnessing now is the bigger part of the cover-up. What did they know? When did they know it? And how much were they actually in on it? That's the question I want to answer.
And it's happening all over America. I mean, we don't want to just focus on Minnesota. We had, Rich, I had somebody on, I did Cottrell today. I had an assemblyman saying it was happening in New York as well with even more money. So, I mean, this is a scandal that's going to gain legs and move in virtually every corner of the United States. But meanwhile, speaking of New York, Zohran Mamdani, our Marxist mayor here, is apparently going to be sworn in by Letitia James and Bernie Sanders. I mean, if in fact what you and I think is going to happen, he's going to run out of money, as all socialists do. The whole house of cards collapses. You're going to see those pictures all over America, and it's going to doom any socialist who wants public office in this country again.
Yeah, apparently his ambition here is to be sworn in by some of the worst, most ridiculous politicians in America. Where's AOC? Where's Ilhan Omar? Where's Jasmine Crockett? Why are they getting in on this too? But look, I'm with you, David. He's either going to fail to enact his agenda, and New York will dodge a bullet, or he'll succeed in enacting his agenda, and it's going to be very bad for New York City, and he'll fail that way.
Ben, it struck me when I heard, especially the Letitia James part, You know, Zohran Mamdani just went down to the Oval Office and had kind of a play nice meeting with President Trump, where it seemed like they were at least going to try to get along, right? For the sake of New York, maybe for nothing else. And now he's going to get sworn in by Letitia James, who did everything in her power to go after President Trump. What is that kind of forecast for what New York City will be like under Mamdani?
Look, I think it's forecasting two things. One, we're coming after anyone that we don't like, and we're going to use the law and do it politically. That's why James is up here with me. If we don't like you, you are not welcome here in New York. This is what socialists, communists, and Marxists do. And this is a cautionary tale. You only need 50 plus 1% to win an election. And if you can run off the same voters, which is, I think, part of their plan, you can have a stranglehold on New York City. Same thing happened in my hometown of Memphis, Tennessee. People were tired of being shot. They were tired of the failing schools. So as soon as you had the resource to get out, you moved to the suburb. Same thing happened in Chicago, Baltimore, Detroit. And I think that's what they're going to try to do here in New York City. That's why the president wanted to meet with him. And so, unfortunately, socialism's coming to New York City, and I'm not sure you're ever going to get rid of it.
Well, they can't print money. And when the garbage strikes begin, I've been here before when that happens, it doesn't last that long before there's a change in government. Remember, even liberals voted for Mayor Giuliani when they saw the way his policies actually work compared to the predecessors. So I think things will change. This is going to be a bad period.
I hope you're right.
Rich Lowry, Ben Ferguson, good to see you both. Thank you. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, guys.
Meet our TurboTax experts in person and let them do your taxes for you. Now this is Taxes. David in theaters now.
I will not be afraid. Are you ready for a great adventure? I will not be.
The #1 family movie in America.
Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
The U.S. has intensified its blockade of Venezuela by trying to intercept a third.
I don't want to do the Bloomberg podcast here, but I do want to listen into G0 and Brenner's take on military strikes in Venezuela. But before we do that, please go to my store, get the turmeric. This will bring down inflammation and soak up free radicals, boost up the immune system, and help with your cardiovascular system. Lignans will help to boost up the immune system and your endocrine system, soak up free radicals, and bring down inflammation. Super important. You can stack them together to get the synergistic effect to boosting up your immune system. Please go to my store, use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last.
And Venezuela, once again, making a lot of news, really the United States making news with Venezuela. And we've seen over the past months a very steady and intentional ratcheting up of pressure from President Trump and his administration. First, it was expanding economic sanctions and a ransom on the head of the president. Then it was sending the U.S. military into the region, more and more capabilities to take out Maduro if necessary and make that presence felt. Then strikes on boats carrying drugs, and then shutting down Venezuelan airspace, and then boarding and seizing oil tankers, and now a boycott on the oceans of all Venezuelan tanker traffic coming through. There are other steps that can be taken right now being actively discussed in the White House. Strikes on Cessnas, small aircraft flying out from western Venezuela that are also carrying drugs. The small boat traffic has been significantly reduced. They're moving to the air. Harder to get imagery showing that there's actually drugs on those planes, and also harder to limit killing civilians if you take them down. But that's one additional measure that would be considered. And then, of course, also targeted strikes on the ground directly. They had been waiting on that, less because of congressional pushback than because the U.S. had much less intelligence of the disposition of Maduro and key advisors around him. They now feel like they have a lot more information, though, of course, that also risks killing a lot of civilians. If you've seen Maduro and his videos recently, every time he's showing up, it's with lots of women and children and the rest surrounding him dancing. He's not stupid. He wants to make it as painful and difficult for the Americans as possible. And let's face it, it is a lot easier to get Maduro out than it is to get Putin to back down in Ukraine, which, as Secretary of State Rubio puts it, isn't our war, isn't even on our continent. Now, technically, Venezuela is not on Marco Rubio's continent either. It is South America. That is a different continent from North America, but Marco's from Florida, and, I guess he can almost see Maduro from his house. So maybe we recognize there's a bit of a technicality there. But anyway, it's a big move. And already what is happening is going to affect some 30% minimum of Venezuelan oil exports, means a much steeper discount for oil coming out of Venezuela. It's also going to impede a lot of the chemicals that they need to import to maintain production. And that is going to cause some costs if this is maintained and Maduro isn't forced out. You're going to see, first of all, a lot more migration from Venezuela, which clearly is not what Trump and Stephen Miller want to see as a consequence of this pressure. You're also damaging Venezuelan oil infrastructure, which is the intention in the near term. But once Maduro is out, if that's where we're going, the cost of rebuilding and reconstructing the Venezuelan economy is going to be a lot greater the more damage that you do. So, there is this, I understand why it is that Trump is trying to go slowly, steadily, and building towards, what mechanism Maduro gets out. But the longer he holds out, the more challenging that policy is. Now, it seems that they are gearing up for direct strikes. I see that the latest additions militarily include electronic warfare aircraft, these EA-18s that are used to suppress enemy air defenses ahead of a strike. There's also a lot more fighter jets, and that means you can hit military installations and the cartels, or you can pursue operations directly against Maduro and senior regime leadership. And clearly what they're trying to do is get the outcome they want with the lowest amount of embarrassment and associated casualties if they can avoid them. I know that what Marco really wants to see is Maduro in jail in the United States. And so I think the hope here is that the regime, under a lot of pressure, that the military can be convinced to give him up. And that doesn't immediately lead to democracy in Venezuela, but it does lead to a new government that would be much more willing to cut a deal with the Trump administration on oil, while Trump gets the big win of having deposed the dictator, the brutal dictator. And then you don't have a long military operations that would be unpopular in the United States. I think under any circumstances, Trump really, really doesn't want boots on the ground. That has been one of the most consistent policies that he has held to from his first administration through this one. So I think if it doesn't work, that they get Maduro dropped by the military, then you'll see efforts to assassinate him, but you're not going to see a formal regime change operation like the Americans had in Iraq. Vanity Fair photos and parallels notwithstanding. I think that there's a reasonable chance that the strategy as they are playing it actually works. It is unpopular in the country as a whole. Strong majorities in the United States think this is a bad idea, but a majority of Trump supporters are happy to have Maduro out and have Trump lean into that policy. And I don't think it is going to split MAGA the way that the Epstein files are, the way that Israel policy is. And internationally, the Russians and the Chinese are certainly saying very negative things about the Trump pressure and efforts, but they're not willing to really do anything. And that's also true across the region for a couple reasons. First of all, because a hard line on the drug traffickers is generally very supported and a top priority of most populations across the region. We see that as broadly as Mexico, as Colombia, as Argentina and Peru. I mean, security is driving the concerns of constituents. It's why we're seeing a turn in many polls towards the right. We just had that in Chile. We're about to have that in Colombia. And this is the El Salvador Nayib Bukele's policies, and he's routinely getting 90% approval ratings for driving them. Also because the United States has overwhelmingly asymmetric power, and so the countries just don't want to get into a fight with them. And if you're Brazil looking for a trade deal, if you are Mexico looking for deals on everything because all of your money and security is tied up with the United States, you're not going to yell and scream, even if you think it's completely illegal for Trump to be engaging in these extrajudiciary executions against the people on the drug boats. You're not going to fight with the Americans on that. So not a lot of blowback as a consequence, and all of that implies that Trump is going to lean in heavier and will end up with military strikes in Venezuela itself unless Maduro is out absent them over the coming weeks and months. That's it for me. I'll talk to you all real soon. Hey everybody, Ian Bremer here, and it is top risks time, not yet for
Denmark's top diplomat tells Trump to keep hands off of Greenland. Why can't America take Greenland? We need it. You know why? We need it as part of our defense grid. Do we really care about what Denmark has to say?
Well, it's part of Denmark. It's like saying that someone wants to take over Hawaii or Alaska or Nebraska, if you will. So it's not so much that we feel like we have a relationship. It's part of our country. So people get quite upset over here when these things happen.
When you look at it, I mean, I'm thinking of the Air Force and the defense of Denmark, and I'm going to suggest, it's not going to compete with the U.S. What is the approach here to defend these decades and century-old relationship? Is it knock on Brussels' door and say, Brussels, help us? Or is it Denmark alone?
Denmark has been very clear for a long time that obviously needs a bit of help to protect a big territory like that. But from 1951, Denmark entered into an agreement with the US about protecting Greenland. US can put up as much military as they like. All they really have to do is just call Copenhagen. The Danish Prime Minister has also opened the door to expanding its cooperation with the US on military presence on Greenland. So I think for Denmark, it's really hard to see what the problem is if we're talking about really defending Greenland, because Denmark has lots of ideas how to do it.
So, Sarah, the average person on the street in Denmark, how do they view Greenland and this particular challenge to what you've characterized as kind of your ownership, obviously? How do they feel, the average person on the street?
Well, Denmark and Greenland has had a long and at times very, very complicated relationship. Greenlanders come to Denmark to go to school, they go to the hospital for very complicated issues. But the relationship has also been fraught. Greenlandic people have very, very many times felt like Denmark has been this evil, imperialistic owner that's come in and impose our values on them. Like the cultures can be quite different. But having said that, Denmark still feels that Greenland is part of the Danish kingdom as much as the Faroe Island is. And up until last year, or if we go back to 2019 when Trump first floated the, back then it was buying Greenland, not taking over, as it looks like. It sounds more like now. People just, I don't think any country would like someone coming in to steal territory. I think Danes are quite upset about that notion.
Sir, we're so honored to have you on with us today. Let me do an audible. In the zeitgeist of America, the feeling is no one in Europe is doing the migrant issue better than Denmark. What is the Denmark strategy for the crushing migrant inflows that other countries are dealing with?
Well, the Danish Prime Minister, being a social democrat, but I think what you're referring to there is that he's found a way to be like a really like a middle party. He's still a good social democrat, but being really tough on immigration. So Denmark has some of the toughest rule on immigration in Europe right now, and we're not taking in a lot of immigrants if the government can avoid it. It's interesting that we have a general election coming up in 2026. We don't know exactly when it is, but the Prime Minister has to call it no later than the end of October. And immigration is such a big issue in that election. It's the Prime Minister has gone very, very tough with immigration, but she's lost some voters on it. She's also gained a lot of voters. So it's a little bit like, is she gaining enough in the right hand, the ones she's losing with the left hand? And that's what they're trying to figure out now. How tough can you really be in immigration?
Clothes are an amazing snapshot of time.
All right.
My passion throughout my career.
We're going to go over CNBC talking about how the economy grew by 4.3% in the third quarter. Please go to my store and get the Myotrol. Myotrol is perfect to gain muscle and maintain muscle, especially if you're 40 years of age or older. Myotrol has polyphenols, flavonoids, and lignans to help with the gene expression to build muscle. Do some resistance training, take the Myotrol, reduce atrophy. It's that simple. You can also stack it with Gladiator barley to improve strength. Now, if you're an athlete, younger or older, you can also benefit by taking Myotrol to help with the strength in your sport. Now, in terms of Gladiator barley will help to build muscle. It's a higher density protein with micronutrients, very high quality, but this will also bring down inflammation so you recover quicker after your workout, soak up free radicals, and detoxify your body. You can take this regularly even if you don't want to gain muscle, but it's really important to gain some muscle as part of your anti-aging protocol, especially your back muscles, to improve your posture, strengthen your vertebrae, the density of your vertebrae, improve your lymphatic flow and your venous return flow. Now, taking Gladiator barley, like I said, helps to detoxify the body, soak up free radicals, and bring down inflammation. That's really important for your immune system, your endocrine system, your cardiovascular system, and brain function. Take this every day. And like I said, you can stack it together to get added synergistic benefits to building muscle and maintaining muscle. So please go to my store, get the Gladiator barley and the Myotrol.
Welcome back to Squawk Box. Rick Santelli here, live at CME HQ with some delayed but very important data points. We'll be looking at October preliminary durable goods, Philly Fed, and GDP. Second time around the block, delayed third quarter numbers. We're looking for 3.3. Zoom, zoom, zoom. 4.3%. 4.3%. That is a nice jump. And I know many may question data gathering, but on the surface, this will be the strongest quarter going back to the third quarter of 2023 when it was 4.7. This is strong. 3.5 on consumption blows away the 2.7 we were expecting. That'll be the best since the last quarter of 24. On the price index, here's some not good news. 3.8% on the price index. That's much higher than 2.7 we were looking for. much higher than 2.1 in the rearview mirror. That would equal the first quarter of 23 to find a higher price structure. You'd have to go to the last quarter of 2022, where we're at 3.9%. Now, if you look at core, a different story. Price index was warm. Core, well, as expected, but still warm. 2.9 is what we were looking for, quarter over quarter. Personal consumption expenditure price index. Now, issue is 2.6 was our last look, so it's up 0.3. 2.9, well, 2.9 will be the warmest since we're at 3.3 in just the first quarter of this year. Now, let's go to Philly Fed non-manufacturing, comes in at minus 16.8. That is actually very close to expectations. That would be the weakest read since October's, minus 22. Now let's go to durable goods. These numbers are October preliminary, minus 2.2%. They're expecting minus 1.5%. That would be the weakest durable goods outlook since July of this year. And if we look at X transportation, well, it definitely improves. Close to expectations, up 0.2%. Up 0.2. Well, we're up 0.6 our last look, which now got upgraded to up 0.7. To give you an idea, up 0.2 is actually the weakest quarter, going back to unchanged quarter, and that was in April of 25. Let's look at non-defense X-Air. This is a proxy for capital spending, coming in up 0.5%, better than expected. Very solid revision in the rearview mirror to up 1.1. Up 1.1 would comp to May when it was up 1.9. Up 0.5. Well, up 0.5 would be actually the weakest, going back to minus 1.5 in April, but still a solid number. And finally, let's go to shipments. On the shipment side, up 0.7. This is good news. Things are moving again. This is multiples of the up 0.3 we're looking for. And in the rearview mirror, a very healthy revision from up 0.9 to up 1.2. After all of that, what's going on? Well, interest rates are to the upside a bit, and that may have something to do with the pricing index on the negative news side. But on the positive news side, better GDP is always good. We'll let the experts pick apart the data gathering and all the issues over time. That should smooth out. But as I said, on the surface, powerful number. The pre-opening equities haven't really responded much. Dow Jones was down. The Dow futures was down about 20 before the data release. It's now down about.
All right. Now the S&P 500 is trading at just under 6,900. So it's at 6,898. I still have an end of year target of 6,850. Okay, let's listen in to News Nation.
Taxes is feeling unlocked. Now Taxes is your open door to new TurboTax stores. Meet our experts. They do your taxes, so you can walk out with confidence. Now this is Taxes.
According to Tanker Trackers, these three ships that we have, again, it's the Skipper of the Centuries, the Bella One, have collectively exported a total of 41 million barrels of crude oil and from Venezuela. You look at the Venezuela's annual oil revenue, this is what they rely on, $17.5 billion. And they both of them under U.S. sanctions, at least $2 billion for some perspective. The 17.5 is the total revenue last year for Venezuela's state-owned oil company, and analysts say it was especially a good year. But oil and Venezuela, this is what matters to them, is really all that they have in many ways. And I feel like that's the backdrop and the context for what we're about to see, which is an announcement on shipbuilding for the president, longer term goals and aspirations and questions, we think, from Kelly Meyer and other reporters in the room in Mar-a-Lago. Geraldo's back with us, all right. Retired Major General William Enyart as well. He's a former Democratic congressman from the state of Illinois. I say you're back, Geraldo. Last hour you were saying you think, that's why I wanted to talk a little bit about some of these ships, that there's much more to it than, you know, announcing what ships we're going to be building in the future. You're expecting more from the president.
I am definitely expecting more, Connell. I believe that when you take a vessel worth multi-millions of dollars and filled with oil, you know, and you seize it, I mean, if it's a blockade, that's an act of war under, you know, the law of war. A blockade is is grounds for a war. It is by definition a war. Quarantine. The quarantine, it's maybe a little nuance, but it means that there's extreme pressure put on ships coming in or out, but not necessarily military.
Right.
But as of right now, what we're seeing is these, this is kinetic. Those are guys are, they got guns. They're warriors. They are seizing. They are absolutely taking control of something that does not belong to the United States. But it is an act of war because this vessel, we think, was used for illicit trade, whether for Russia or for Venezuela's behalf, selling to China, vessels changing their names, changing the electronic identification codes, the ship finder, to confuse. But it's crafty, but it all hangs by a thread.
Right.
The chopper crashes, someone gets hurt, someone takes out a shotgun from behind a desk or something, anything like that, you'll see very, very quickly how this thing could go south.
Any second now, we're told the president's going to start this event. So, General, and your thoughts to follow up on what Geraldo said on the context, but also what you expect here today on the shipbuilding announcement.
Well, what's expected to come out of the shipbuilding announcement, first of all, last week the Navy announced that it was canceling the Constellation class order of frigates, and then in favor of a new order of a smaller frigate, which is based on a Coast Guard cutter frame. And frigates are much smaller ships. They run about 4,500 tons, so it's about half the size or a little less of the current in terms of displacement, in terms of what we are currently floating as destroyers. The destroyers that are being trumpeted as the Trump class will range, according to speculation, somewhere between 15 and 20,000 tons. So those are much larger ships. Those are going to be 50% to twice as big as our current flotilla of destroyers. And they'll be anywhere from 4 to 5 times as large as the new frigates that will be coming online.
So what do you see this being about? I mean, Geraldo and I were talking about Venezuela, but, longer term, bigger picture, you're countering China and their naval dominance in the Pacific. And if so, how big a deal is this in your view, General?
Well, there's countervailing sentiments among naval observers here. Some folks think that these larger class ships are just what we need in order to protect aircraft carriers. They're going to be able to keep up with aircraft carriers and will carry more missiles and anti-aircraft, anti-missile missiles. So some folks are saying this is just what we need. Others are saying that these are outdated. They're not carrying enough armament. So there's certainly a bit of back and forth over it. The frigates don't carry a lot of armaments. They're really more since they're in use by the Coast Guard. They're essentially more a Coast Guard type weapon system rather than being really useful on the high seas and particularly in a fight with China. Although if you were in the Taiwan Straits, that's only 90 miles wide, so it's like the difference between South Florida and Cuba.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our News Nation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.
Alrighty.
What's down there? For ages, man can only wonder. Until 1957, when a man named Carl Loren.
Well, Lori, I just want to ask if Trump has mentioned any South Korean shipbuilders in that announcement to build harder, better, faster, stronger warships stateside.
He sure did, JP, and it's Hanwha. And as you know, Hanwha has a very extensive relationship with the Trump administration, and they are now going to be a key player in what Trump has declared as the Trump fleet of vessels. That's the vessel class that it's called. And so, in fact, when it comes to Hanwha, Philly shipyard, we actually sat down extensively. We had amazing access, JP. We have a documentary on CNBC.com as well as the YouTube channel where we talked about U.S. shipbuilding, and we went firsthand and spoke with the CEO of Hanwha Shipping as well as Hanwha Philly Shipyard. And I have to tell you, JP, the numbers do not match to what the president is telegraphing because of the fact that as of right now, Hanwha Philly Shipyard only makes one vessel a year. When I interviewed the two executives, one from Hanwha Shipping as well as Hanwha Philly Shipyard, they explained to me that it's going to be a combination. It's going to be a hybrid building, if you will, where a lot of the parts of the vessels are going to be made in South Korea at the South Korea shipyard, and then it's going to be assembled in America. And so when you look at the time frame, President Trump said 2 vessels will be made in the 2 years. That fits in the timeline of what the capacity that Hanwha Philly Shipyard can achieve. And the reason why is they do not have the manpower. They are ramping up. Remind you, they just purchased that shipyard a year ago, and it needs extensive investments. I've also been told that Hanwha is looking to expand its physical footprint around Philadelphia so they could start making more vessels. Trump wants to have 10 vessels shortly thereafter, and then down the road, about a decade from now, at least 20. And so the numbers don't match in terms of this time frame, but from what I've been told when we were there, Hanwha is committed to making sure that they get their end of the deal completed, but it is not going to be an easy task.
Lorianne, great reporting there, and of course, as you mentioned, quite a heavy lift still to come when it comes to achieving some of the ambitions around the plans that the president has announced. But I also wanted to ask you about another story that you've been following really closely. I've been following it closely as well. It's this situation in Venezuela, because Trump mentioned this in the speech. He said that the U.S. is going to be keeping these ships and the oil that the U.S. is seizing off the coast of Venezuela. What's going on there, and what are you seeing particularly in the supply chain right now, which is your area of expertise?
Sure thing. So when it comes to what's going on with the Venezuelan tankers, it's more than just the seizing of the oil. You are looking at, in real time, a slow increase in geopolitical tensions. And what struck me, like what happened over the weekend, is something that Kepler, one of the analysts, told me, is that it looks like that the United States was able to seize the Centuries. That's one of the vessels that was seized over on Saturday under what is called the 2002 Salas-Becker Agreement, which is with Panama. Here's the key thing that all the investors out there need to be aware of. It doesn't matter if the vessel that is being seized by the United States is on the sanction list. It's what the vessel is carrying or the intent of the vessel. Case in point, the Centuries, which was seized on Saturday, it was not on the sanctions list, but because it was a Panama flagged vessel, they called Panama and they said, we know for a fact that there is Venezuelan oil on that vessel. We are going to seize it. And under this agreement with Panama, inked in 2002, it's a cooperative agreement. Panama said, okay, go to that vessel. And so I then asked Kepler, well, if there's one Panama vessel out there, right, Panama flag vessel, are there others? And they said yes. They are looking at 3 more vessels that are full of Venezuelan oil that are under the Panamanian flag. And yes, indeed, the United States government can seize that vessel, even if it's not on the sanctions list, because the fact that it's carrying the Venezuelan oil. The other one, when you're looking at a supply chain perspective, when you're looking at the last vessel, the Bella 1, she was actually empty, but she was en route to Venezuela in order to pick up the illicit oil, which shows intent, and that's why they took her out of the game.
But Lorianne, to your point, it seems as if the measures that the Trump administration have been taking have certainly sent a shockwave or a chilling effect through the entire shadow fleet. I thought it was interesting as well that President Trump has not necessarily ruled out war with Venezuela. How seriously should market investors and traders be taking that rhetoric from this peacemaking president, as he calls himself?
You know, when it comes to the bluster, we all know with President Trump that there is a lot of bluster behind his words. But also, if anybody has been covering Donald Trump, as we have over the last administration, this one, he is a man of his word. And so if he does threaten, he follows through. It's not empty threats. And so if he does talk about the fact of a possible ground invasion, while nobody would want to see that, he's already made good on his promises of having this blockade. Trump makes good on his threats. And so I think you just don't discount it. It's just a matter of hopefully not when, but, you know, if.
Okay, so Lorianne, I'm curious as to how this might impact Asia, especially ahead of that Lunar New Year holiday for China. What can you tell us about what Asia might be, what Asia could expect?
Some of that oil was going to China. Second, or I'm not sure, directly to China or indirectly. Secondly, it tells President Xi that our Navy is starting to get in gear. President Xi thinks that he can just take Taiwan. And Trump needs to show President Xi, you know what? It's not going to be so easy. It's about time that we had a president that actually made sure that we had freedom of navigation through the 9-dash line. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with that? See, these individuals that are America first, you know, saying don't get involved in Asia and only focus on domestic issues. No, they're wrong. They're wrong. Our way of life is predicated on freedom of navigation in the Pacific. Full stop. Epstein files don't matter. Don't matter. Taiwan matters. Freedom of navigation matters. 9-dash line matters.
From a lot of these fast developments.
With the fastest developments, as we all know, China and Cuba are the top consumers of Venezuelan oil. That's why we saw China over the weekend actually first come out and condemn what is going on, because in the end, they are going to be impacted. They will be able to find oil in other parts of the world, but it's not going to be cheap. Pushing forward to Lunar New Year, which is really key for the Japanese economy in so many different levels. But looking at the manufacturing and supply chain, normally when the country shuts down for the holiday, you have U.S. importers pulling forward all of their orders weeks and months in advance so they have the product here, so, you know, they can have their product before the manufacturing plant shut down. We just did a CNBC supply chain survey. And that was with like Kuehne+Nagel, DHL, OLUSA, Seagull Logistics, all of these people that receive orders from U.S. shippers. And they're going to be pulling that freight from the boats, okay, to the warehouses. They were telling me in this survey that it's going to be pretty much status quo. There is not going to be a bump here. And as we know, China makes its GDP with the exports. And so that's going to be a key thing for us to look at.
President Trump is continuing his pressure campaign on Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro's government. Heritage Foundation National Security and Foreign Policy Vice President Victoria Coates is with us this morning. She served in the first Trump administration as Deputy National Security Advisor. And welcome, Victoria. It's good to see you. I saw the president talking yesterday, and I just thought it was funny. Not funny, but interesting the way he said, look, a lot of past presidents didn't mind what was happening in Venezuela and the effects that it was having on the United States, and in terms of fentanyl and drugs and the poison that's been coming into the country. He says, I do mind, and I'm going to do something about it. I think you're of the same thinking on this issue.
Well, good morning, Joe. Good to see you. Yes, I think what's happening now, I mean, this problem in Venezuela has been building for 20 years since Hugo Chavez came in. I mean, 30 years. You can even go back further. And it's been a terrible problem in our hemisphere for the reasons you're detailing. It's drugs, it's crime, it's human trafficking. All of these things are now centered on Venezuela. And you look at kind of the constellation of bad actors in the Western Hem, thinking about countries like Nicaragua and much closer to the United States, Cuba. This is really a security problem for the United States. And so I think that's what the president was signaling yesterday, that he's just not going to tolerate this any longer. And so we have our biggest military buildup since Iraq going on in both the Pacific and the Caribbean around Latin America right now to signal to Nicolas Maduro that we're serious this time.
It doesn't have to be that way either, does it? We don't need to write off the Southern Hemisphere. You look at Argentina or even Chile at this point, and it could be a great hemisphere in terms of not just our interests, but and there are people that wear white hats, I think, in the world, and people that aren't so great, and we can say that, and it's possible that some regime changes could be very positive, not just for the United States, but for the world.
Absolutely. And this doesn't have to be regime change, you know, at the tip of the spear. You mentioned Argentina and Chile. We could talk about Bolivia. These are all countries that changed at the ballot box. They had elections. The citizens of these countries decided they didn't like the socialism that had caused such terrible economic ruin in those beautiful countries, and that they were going to go in a more conservative direction. And so that can happen in May in neighboring Colombia, right next to Venezuela. And it actually did happen in Venezuela 2 years ago, and when the people of Venezuela overwhelmingly voted to get rid of Maduro, to bring in an opposition candidate. That's not the United States imposing regime change. That's the people of Venezuela putting things in their hands.
I wasn't talking about forced regime change. I was talking about what through the voting, but they voted already in Venezuela. It just didn't count, right?
Exactly. I mean, Maduro has a huge apparatus, excuse me, in place to maintain control of Venezuela and people largely exported from Cuba and China. And so that's what he's using. But the people of Venezuela clearly want a different path.
Yeah. And maybe in New York City, we can reject socialism at the ballot box.
Hopefully. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Boomer Boost. The Boomer Boost has 68 nutrients. It has a very comprehensive compound profile shown on the screen. Please go to my store, read the label. This is very important to take every day. It's a powder. You mix it with soft foods, filtered water, a smoothie, or even with just milk. But take it every day, and it targets multiple systems. It targets brain function. It helps with cardiovascular. It helps with building muscle, increases your energy levels, increases your metabolism. It'll allow you to control your A1C levels and your blood glucose levels, right? And when you do this regularly, you're slowing down the aging process. And when you're doing that, you're boosting up your immune system and your endocrine system. Take this every day. Very important. Now, if you're an athlete, what I recommend is to use this as a pre or post-workout fuel source in addition to taking it every day. And what that will do is allow you to recover quicker in your workout and help with your strength training. This stacks really well with gladiator barley and heirloom barley. You'll get further benefits of controlling your A1C levels. And it's a great way to lose weight. Get in shape. Have a steady burn of energy. You take this, within 72 hours, you're going to start feeling the effects. You'll have a steady burn of energy, no spiking. You'll have more vitality. You'll be more active. And by taking this every day, you'll have the compound benefits of targeting these systems to boosting up your immune system, your endocrine system, your brain function, your cardiovascular system. And you'll be slowing down the aging process. It's really simple. Brings down inflammation, helps the immune system. So please go to my store, get the Boomer Boost, take it every day. It's really important.
We'll see. That remains to be seen at this point. And you figure oil is fair game. with what's happening, exactly the tactics that the president or the United States is pursuing at this point.
Yes, and I think the most important thing is this action against oil tankers, because this is essentially Nicolas Maduro's ATM. He's using the illegal exports of sanctioned oil to keep the cash flowing into his regime, to keep his generals happy. And so that's why it's so important. And it is important to note, illegal for the United States to take these actions against this shadow fleet. These are vessels that aren't properly flagged, they're not properly insured, they're very poorly maintained. We could have an environmental disaster at any time. So the United States is doing a good thing for the world by interdicting these exports from Venezuela. And that's what ultimately, I think, will put the pressure on Maduro to actually leave.
We definitely wanted to talk about this, but I guess nobody knows what the journal is going to publish. But this op-ed piece on the Heritage Foundation is something to behold today. Have you seen it, Victoria?
I have. I mean, the Wall Street Journal spends a lot of time writing op-eds about the Heritage Foundation. I think that maybe there's some more interesting topics for them to cover. But I defer any questions about our personnel issues back to Heritage and to our leadership.
But the journal implies that the activist policy of the past in terms of foreign policy are gone, and that flies in the face of what you just talked about. I mean, you're fully on board with what I would think would be considered some activist foreign policy here.
Well, and that's what I would actually, again, refer you to is what we've actually published on these topics. And, I'm the Vice President for National Security at the Heritage Foundation. I received no outreach from the journal on this piece. They didn't seem to look at anything in my record that I've done that would be, I think, in direct contradiction to what they published. So it's a very, very strange thing for them to do. As I said, I think there are other topics that might demand their attention.
There are some colleagues that obviously had a problem with some of the things that the president, Kevin Roberts, is I don't know, Nick Fuentes, it's just quite a piece in the journal. I'm sorry to hit you with that, but it's like the elephant in the room today in terms of. But the journal has taken the Trump administration to task for industrial policy changes and not being true conservatives. And they think that the Heritage Foundation has lost some of its, pursuit of, the judiciary the way it used to think, industrial policy the way the Heritage used to think. And they quote something, the conservatives need to know what time it is, according to Mr. Roberts, sort of saying that the old conservative, Reagan conservatives are no longer relevant in today's world.
No, I don't think that's at all true in terms of what Dr. Roberts thinks. I think in terms of, industrial policy and what we're trying to do, we have a situation here where, of course, we've been proud free marketeers for these many decades at Heritage. The problem is, Joe, that China does not play by those rules. The assumption was that if we, flooded the world with free trade, everybody would want free trade, and that would be, a happy outcome for everyone. The problem is China is cheating. They don't, I think, that way at all. They have exploited that apparatus. So the tension that we have to navigate now is between, wanting to pursue the ideal of free trade and then dealing with the reality of our global posture at this point. So that's what we're trying to navigate. And I think pretending that we're going back to 1982 isn't helpful.
That's really a result of the tariff policy, and that's not a terribly good sign. But what is good is what's happening on the investment front, and we're certainly seeing a lot of dollars pouring in.
You know what's amazing with these money managers? You ask them, where'd you go to school? Some of them went to the Ivy League, some of them went to Ivy League Plus. Okay, all right. Then you ask them, what did you do before you were a money manager? Before you were a fund manager? And a lot of times they say, well, they, were coming right out of school. They were interning at some bank, maybe at an accounting firm, and then moved up the ladder. You ask them what kind of degree did they get. It was usually economics or finance. sometimes history, once in a while engineering, very rare, but once in a while, mostly it's economics. And then you ask them, like, what job did you really do that actually made something instead of pushing paper? They can't answer it because they were part of the paper pushing generation. And they're supposed to be the ones that tell you what's really going on in the economy when they never, ever made something in their life. Problem. Big problem.
Yesterday, the administration suspending leases for all 5 wind farms that are currently under construction off the East Coast. One of them in particular we're going to be focusing on here, Revolution Wind, which is just off the coast of Rhode Island, just south of Point Judith, if you know where that is. It is currently being assembled in New London. Now, this should not be a big shock. If you've followed what President Trump has said over the course of the campaign, his first term and now back in the White House, in this case, the Interior Department, in fact, halted these projects in the name of national security, suggesting that the turbines may interfere with radar. The president, of course, has never been a fan of wind energy, as we're reminded through the ages. Listen.
I never understood wind. I know windmills very much. I've studied it better than anybody.
You see these things all over the place. They destroy everything. They're horrible and the most expensive energy there is. They ruin the environment. They kill the birds. They kill the whales. So we're going to try and have a policy where no windmills.
And not only that, it's really hard to recycle the material. They don't tell you that either.
Wind is in virtual bankruptcy right now.
And so here we are, with 5 projects representing $28 billion in committed capital, several billion of those in the state of Connecticut, which is why we're glad to be joined by the governor of Connecticut, Democrat Ned Lamont. It's great to have you, sir, with us on Bloomberg TV and radio. If, in fact, this is halted here, the mayor of New London, Michael Passero, says the Grinch has just stolen Christmas. Is he right?
Not a heck of a Christmas present, was it? Look, you just heard the president say he doesn't like wind power, but he's not going to interrupt things that were permitted a long time ago. Our wind, Revolution Wind, was actually permitted under Trump 1 back in 2018-19, so a long time ago. So this was a real shock to our system. They did it to us over Labor Day as well. Remember, they had a stop work order. No warning at all. This time they pulled the permits. And we've got to find like heck to come back because you're never going to bring down the price of electricity in New England unless we get more generation, and that's what wind power does.
Governor, in September, your state successfully won its bid in courts to lift the moratorium that the Trump administration put in when it first took office on wind power. Now the administration is going out again and raising national security concerns. Some analysts are looking at that and saying this could be a more durable way to essentially do the same thing. What's your take, and do you think those national security concerns are legitimate?
No. I think the president said, I don't like wind power. Come up with another way that you can shut it down. It was only very recently they came up with these national security concerns. I talked to the Secretary of Interior, Doug Burgum. I've known him for many years. I said, I'm not sure this is for real, but if you want to, we'll come down, we'll talk to you about it. We'll bring down the folks building the wind power, the engineers, but don't stop us in mid-construction for the second time in 3 months. You're just blowing a hole in our efforts to bring down the price of electricity in New England.
You know, we understand that this project is about 85% complete. It would power some 350,000 homes across Connecticut and Rhode Island. What will happen to electricity bills without the wind farm?
More likely to spike. We can't put pipes in the ground to get natural gas and oil. We're just not that type of a state. We don't have that capacity. It's very rare that we can create our own generation. Offshore wind is one way we can do that. And the more generation we have, the less spiking energy during very cold periods. And that means we can save money for electric ratepayers.
We want to welcome our viewers joining us from the TV side, Bloomberg TV colleagues. And we are here with Connecticut Governor Ned Lamont talking, of course, about this new announcement out of the Department of Energy today, putting a halt on those 5 major wind farm projects, including the one that's being assembled in your state. Governor, I'm curious how this is going to play with constituents, not only in your state, but across the country, as energy prices are expensive, it's cold, and they're looking to spike. You know, the energy crisis is something that's constantly talked about. This is also an administration that is trying to remove barriers to other forms of energy, including nuclear. The president has said he wants to restart coal. So why not add wind energy to that? Why is this specific mechanism of generating power in his crosshairs?
It is contradictory. I've talked to the president about this. He cares very strongly about bringing down the price of electricity, especially in New England, where we don't have a lot of our own generation and it gets expensive. I said, we'll work with you on nuclear power, we'll work with you on natural gas and other sources, but don't pull the plug on a plant that's already 85% complete, ready to turn on in just a few months. That makes no sense at all. I thought we had an agreement they weren't going to do that, then we were shocked.
All right, well, I want to get back to the justification from the administration here, Governor, and I know you commented on this briefly, but I'd like to hear more about the national security concerns or lack thereof, knowing that the Interior Department says these turbines may interfere with radar systems. We understand, however, according to the Attorney General William Tong, the project's already gone through federal review. He says fully vetted, permitted, state, federal, up and down, inside out, every which way you can. Is that correct?
William's absolutely correct. And actually, it went through a very strong national security review over the last few years, voted on a bipartisan basis in Congress just a year and a half ago, where they said there's
the
no
administration just making this up?
security issues.
Is the administration just making this up then?
I think so, but look, I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. Get us down there, we'll bring the very best engineers from Orsted, who's a developer, we'll talk it through, but there's no excuse for shutting this down in mid-stride, not in the ninth inning of the ball game. What they're seeing, drones has changed the world dramatically. They want to take a second look at, onshore radar. It didn't change the world in the last, 12 months.
Also, this is not, to a point you made earlier, this is not a new technology. These wind turbines have existed in Europe, much to the president's chagrin, for quite a few years now. We haven't previously heard of it having big impacts on NATO or Europe's military readiness in offshore areas there. We've also got some reporting from Bloomberg and analysts at Raymond James saying, I'm skeptical that there's any new information about the military concerns all of a sudden that single-handedly warrants these projects being halted. So do you think this is an aesthetic, not necessarily an economic or national security decision?
I mean, last time around it was birds and whales. This time around it's radar. I don't know what it's going to be next time. I got to tell you, I come out of the business world. I thought the Trump administration and a lot of business folks in it was going to be a pro-business administration. But this herky-jerky, on again, off again. First they did it in tariffs, then they did it in SNAP, now they're doing wind power. Makes it very difficult to do business with this administration. Very difficult.
Well, I'd like to hear more about that, just from your view in Connecticut. You mentioned SNAP. We can add Obamacare subsidies that are about to expire, sending people's bills higher. How much are you and other governors working to fill affordability gaps that are being created by the administration?
I can tell you, here in Connecticut, we've set aside $500 million just to at least protect the most vulnerable. But the idea that you were going to yank food support from working families when food prices have almost doubled in the last 5 years made no sense. Then as Trinidad pointed out, when it comes to the healthcare subsidies.
But food prices are higher because of overproduction of money creation from the Federal Reserve during the Obama administration. Not Obama, the Biden administration, and the Obama during Lehman, all right? But there's an overproduction of money from the Federal Reserve. And because of that, we had inflation. on top of a regulatory framework that allowed for consolidation of farms and cattle ranches to be subsumed into a larger conglomerate that allowed for monopoly pressure to jack up the prices of beef. This is the Biden administration. Biden administration. And then during the Biden administration, you remember all the news out there that it was like this storage facility was on fire, this butcher facility was on fire. Remember that? And then all of a sudden, we don't have this anymore under President Trump. Something was going on to push the prices of food up on purpose. And that was during the Biden
more
administration.
Electricity generation to bring down costs for you and your family, and pull the plug on Revolution Wind in the ninth inning makes no sense at all.
Well, this is something that we're going to keep talking about here. It sounds like you might not have a sense or be able to quantify how much those bills are going to rise, Governor. Is that fair to say?
I can tell you that it's going to go up, and it could go up dramatically during very cold times when wind power is generating the most, and we're going to have a spike in energy demand. That's what I'm trying to protect you from.
So what? Buy some futures in natural gas. You'll make some money. And you'll probably make more money by buying those futures and offset and still have more money when you pay your electric bill and your gas bill.
On this Tuesday on Bloomberg. And we'll have much more ahead as we make our way toward the second hour of Bound.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the C60. You can get it in avocado oil, extra virgin olive oil, and MCT coconut oil. You can get it in a 2-ounce, a 4-ounce, or an 8-ounce configuration. C60 needs to be in an oil for proper absorption. It's best to take it on an empty stomach, like in the morning. It'll soak up free radicals. It's 1,000 times stronger than vitamin C, and it will help to boost up your immune system, your endocrine system, help with your cardiovascular system, and even brain function. You know why? Because if you have healthy neurons, by reducing stress, by soaking up free radicals, and allowing your mitochondria in your neuron to produce the ATP it needs, you'll have more neurotransmitters, you'll have better conductivity, and you'll be thinking faster and having better memory. At the vascular level, by soaking up free radicals, you're reducing plaque formation because you have less oxidized LDL. And by soaking up free radicals at the basal layer of your skin will improve and be healthier. C60 stacks really well with resveratrol. That's part of the reason why you take C60 and resveratrol together, your skin looks much better and younger, more youthful. Take it every day. It's going to soak up those free radicals, boost up your energy levels, increase the health of your mitochondria. You will feel the effects of this within 2 months of taking it every day, a teaspoon a day, every day. And you'll have more energy, more vitality. And you'll start to notice that your endocrine system and your immune system is performing better. You can concentrate better. You get more benefits when you add a holistic approach to your life. Proper diet, proper exercise, proper supplementation, getting enough sleep, learning new things, having some spirituality or mindfulness in your life, and approaching this in a holistic way, you're going to slow down the aging process. Take the C60 every day. Now, if you take this for 1 year and you compare what you look like before you started taking C60, and you are taking C60 every day for 1 year, you will look younger. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the C60. That's my broadcast for today. Use discount 5. You get $5 off any order. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Thank you for listening. Please ask your social media to follow me. Make sure you follow me on X, GETTR, YouTube, Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble, Substack, TikTok, and Patreon. Go to the store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Thank you for listening and have a nice day.